Hello and welcome to Climate Week New York broadcast on day 3. I'm Ingmar Ensog, founder and CEO We Don't Have Time. And as usual, we start from our home studio here in Stockholm before we hand over to New York. This helps us connect more speakers to the conversation. Speakers that not always are able, willing, to come to United States. It's a very good way to lower your carbon emission if you don't need to travel to speak wherever in the world. But in the geopolitics, some people actually don't want to go to United States today because if you're a scientist, if you're an activist, it's not 100% sure you're allowed in. So what we are going to focus on this half an hour is science. We need to make science great again. And what we mean with that is not that science itself needs to change, but if no one listens to science, if our leaders or policymakers and politicians are not respecting science, and if people are mixing up science and facts with opinions, science are not great. So it's a little bit like having a product. I'm an entrepreneur. If you have a product that is great, that is the best product you ever produced, but no one wants to buy it, it's not a great product. It's the same thing with science. We need to communicate it, we need to market it, we need to get people excited, and therefore we need communication. So that's what we're going to focus on this half an hour. We have an exciting guest that will reveal a big, bold plan to get science into the heart of United Kingdom decision making that we will hear more from. But before we go into that, I would like to give you the latest science update from the leading climate scientist Johan Rockström from the Potsdam Institute. Just the other day, they released an update about the planetary boundaries. And let's hear what the science have to say about the health of the planet in this short message.
Welcome to the 2025 Planetary Health Check report by the Planetary Boundary Science Lab here at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. The 2025 report confirms the scientific consensus that we have a deep planetary challenge. 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries were breached, and this year we're forced to conclude that a 7th boundary also has been breached. It is ocean acidification that is now also moving into the risk zone. All of these 7 boundaries are unfortunately continuing to move in the wrong direction, so we haven't yet bent the curves towards the safe landing for humanity within the safe operating space of the planetary boundaries on Earth. This is the major challenge. We're not yet in the high risk zone of irreversible, unmanageable change of the planet, which suggests that we can still turn this around. The window is still open, even though it's closing fast, and we have so much evidence of scalable solutions across all sectors, from the food sector to the built environment to the energy transition, that we can bend the curves and bring ourselves back within a safe operating space within the next decades. The challenge is to increase the scale and the speed of transformations to have a chance of a prosperous, equitable future for humanity on Earth.
So, if you haven't seen it before, you should go and check out Planetary Health, that you can follow the state, how our planet actually, the health of the planet. And as you heard, we really need to go to the doctor. And it's only the leaders we have that can make sure that we really are going and visit the doctor. So we need them to not only listen to the science, we need also to have them to follow the science. And unfortunately, some people, when they get an alarming message from their doctor, they try to deny it. They try to say that I don't like the doctor. He's saying that I'm very unhealthy. Let's do something else and start drinking and smoking instead. And that's unfortunately what's happening in the United States. Instead of listening to the science, they're attacking the scientists because they don't like the message, because the message says that they need to do things differently. get off oil, for example. It's the exact same thing. If you're an alcoholic and your doctor say get off alcohol, some are following the advice, others are drinking more and try to attack that doctor. That's not a really grown-up way to handle a crisis. So we need to change that. And in order to get the leaders go to the doctor and get the treatment, we need scientists to have a better voice. And that's what makes Science Great Again campaign that we at We Don't Have Time have created is all about. We need to make science at center of decision making. And we also need to make science cool again. And producing a red cap with a little bit provocative slogan is working. So why don't we use that for getting the politicians to the doctor? So that's what we're doing. And you can actually support this campaign by going to wedon'thavetime.org/make science great again. You can get your own cap by donating to our foundation, where we will use the money to communicate about science. And one thing we're going to do with start next year is to start hosting global science briefings targeted media and journalists. Exactly like how it was during the pandemic. Every day, different governments had press conferences about how to fight the disease, what's the status, how are we progressing, and what can we do about it. And that really helped solve the pandemic. We want to achieve the same thing for state of the planet. So we really can get as many people as possible to see what's happening and what we can do about it, because there's a lot of things we can do about it. And it's also a lot of things that are actually moving in the right direction that we also need to educate media and politicians and the general public about, because without reporting about the progress, people will just give up. Something we will talk about today is actually a really interesting science briefing that We Don't Have Time is not organizing, but is organized by the speaker we will soon beam in here. It's a national emergency briefing, and it's going to target member of parliaments in the United Kingdom to get them to understand the emergency. They need to understand the science. And this is a great initiative that we at We Don't Have Time and Make Science Great Again totally support. Our role is not to do what others are doing. Our role is to amplify what's happening. And we hope by spreading what is going to happen in UK globally, that it will be a lot of ripple effects. So we will have those national emergency briefings all over the place. So if you want us to continue, scale science, help science, and help all the initiatives out there, you can scan this QR code and be part of this. Because the more we are, the better we can help science to become great and also defend from all those attacks. So that was my introduction message. But how can we communicate better? Many people, they are laughing a little bit when I say we need to help scientists communicate. I mean, some people are really great in science to communicate, but even those that are great communicators often lack the resources, the budget to do it. So we want to help provide that with the help of our platform. But it's not only providing the audience behind it. It's also about how to deliver the message so people really can relate to it. And here comes, humor can play a very big role here. So I will now show you a short film that is produced by our next speaker soon joining us. And it's all about translating scary science to something people can laugh and relate to. So let us play that video and continue the conversation afterwards.
Let's make this climate crisis a climate crisisn't.
Hi, I'm Michael Oppenheimer, professor of geosciences at Princeton University.
Hi, I'm David Cross, and I am not a scientist, so you can trust me. Joking.
The climate crisis is no longer a matter of scientific projections or partisan politics. It's well and truly here. Heat records are being broken all around the world. In fact, last year was the hottest year since the industrial era began.
Translation, the shit is hitting the fan. And the fan is on maximum.
Millions of us have experienced extreme weather events ourselves, from hurricanes to flooding to wildfires. Global warming makes many such events much more frequent, as well as significantly more devastating.
Pretty soon, Netflix are going to switch all their disaster movies into their documentaries section.
These unprecedented weather events are already occurring at 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. Most scientists anticipate we're heading for 2 degrees at the very least, if not 3 degrees. So what we're seeing today is just the beginning.
If the difference between 1.5 and 3 doesn't sound like a lot, it's because we need new numbers. Fucked? Totally fucked. Dead? Question mark?
At this rate, we'll see cascading real-life impacts, including crop failure, food shortages, extreme heat, as well as huge economic costs, not the least in the insurance markets.
You may not give a shit about the polar bears, but I'll bet you give a shit about your home insurance going through the roof.
To limit these devastating impacts, we first of all need to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to ramp it down, but instead we're now expanding production.
I knew drill baby drill wasn't sensible policy. I knew it.
There is actually no need to keep drilling when innovative technologies like solar and wind are now proven and affordable, and in fact will power the dominant economies of tomorrow.
China? Well, they're cracking on. They're not stupid. Am I saying we are? Yes.
One of the main reasons we're failing to act is that oil, gas, and coal companies don't have to pay for the pollution they create. Instead, they can spend the money on lobbying politicians on both sides of the aisle.
The fossil fuel companies have known about this since the 70s, and they have covered up the evidence. This is an actual fucking conspiracy.
We're at a critical point in human history with a short window before things spin out of control. At this rate, we're not going to pass on to our kids the same incredible Earth on which we've thrived.
The planet is a precious legacy that is our solemn duty to pass on to AI. Oh, our children? Oh.
Polls show 74% of us want the government to do more to fight global warming, including many who voted Republican. We all need to step up the pressure. Go and meet your representatives or call them and tell them you fully expect them to act on climate change. They still care about your vote.
The fossil fuel guys are up your congressman's ass. You need to get in there too, all of you. Don't worry, there's plenty of room.
Act now. Later is too late.
What he said, but with the word fuck in it. There you go.
No, that's not mine.
It came out of your pocket. No,
Wouldn't
you
be
love Slim
surprising.
Jims. You said to me, I love Slim Jims.
Americans are in the right place with regard to doing the right thing on a problem like climate change. The problem has been leadership has been chaotic and inconsistent.
We tend to tackle a problem after we've suffered the enormous consequences of it.
They're problems which are solvable.
Is there a role for humor to help get the message across?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, you got to talk to people like they're normal people, and people have a sense of humor even about some fairly grim things.
Right.
You know, you think a bunch of scientists are going to convince people? Scientists are not geniuses at communicating anything but science, and some of them aren't even that good at communicating science. We need more people like you.
Well, it's an interesting point, specifically the positive things you've said about me.
Mother Nature will win eventually, basically, because the evidence will be so undeniable. You can't beat reality.
I think this is brilliant, and it's a big, big honor for me to welcome Nick Aldridge, co-founder of Climate Science Breakthrough, to this broadcast. Nick, are you here? Uh,
You-
this is, I mean, can you just tell the audience what happened when you launched this video? It was launched a couple of months ago, if I'm correct.
It was our first, so we'd made 4 in the UK. This was our first US film, in a very tricky climate, actually. When we first launched, it was quite possible to go viral on social media, but with certain ownership changes, it's a lot more difficult. But it did pretty well. We had about 3 million views. The high point being getting on CBS mornings. So they had a full, frank climate discussion, which is quite a rare thing on the media these days, with our comedian David Cross and with the climate scientist, the legend that is Mr. Oppenheimer. So I think it really made some impact.
I think it's an Oscar nominee for me. I mean, we need to be able to use humor to talk about serious things, not only science. And this is brilliantly doing both of that. Can you just tell us what's your background? How come you jumped into climate science communication the way you do?
Oh, goodness. Well, there are so many incredible people working in this space who come through routes that, to me, make complete sense. They've come from creatives background. They've come from science backgrounds. I mean, mine's fairly different. I was in manufacturing, and I think what drew me into climate was that in my manufacturing capabilities, we burnt a lot of gas to manufacture ceramic tiles. And it was burning gas that sort of introduced me to the concept of carbon and climate change. This is some 20 years ago. So I think I acquired early knowledge on the crisis. But at that stage, I assumed that the grown-ups would come along and it would be solved. So I would have to maybe sit and watch the changes, which at the time we could have made maybe reduced emissions by 1% a year and we'd have been fine. But then as the years drew by, I realized it's no longer okay to be an observer. You have to act if you have this knowledge. So it was a simple case of saying to myself, okay, what can I do to change the conversation?
But this is interesting. You were not in communication, you were in manufacturing. How come you're so good at communication?
Well, now listen, this is important. I can't claim all the credit here. I was in communications in that my roles were marketing based. So I understood how to work with creatives. I understood how to take, you mentioned being an entrepreneur. I understood how to take a product, break it down to its benefits and try and communicate that to people who had other things to think about. And this is the same. This is the same process. You're trying to take information and translate it and inject it into people's lives who might be concerned about very many other things, not your product. So I was lucky enough to team up with a creative pair called the Utopia Bureau. And I presented my problem, which was I had been engaged by watching climate scientists. It was a particular talk by Kevin Anderson, Professor Kevin Anderson. But I had no idea how we could package up this delivery of a science briefing effectively in a way that people would digest. Because let's face it, science is dry, it's lots of data, there's lots of detail. I mean, I don't know whether you ever tuned in to the last IPCC report when it came out in 23. Yeah.
I
When
mean,
I
I've
did,
seen the press conferences, and it's not the most exciting thing. How
no,
it can be done a little bit more,
yes,
fired up, I believe.
yes, I tuned in and I think there were 320 people watching.
Yeah,
Now, this was the
exactly.
most
I was one of
important.
those. I was one of those.
This was the most important information on the planet at the time, as far as
Yeah,
I'm concerned. So,
yeah.
so we have a serious problem here, and I think the big picture is leaders won't act decisively until the scale of the threat is impossible to ignore. And so, how do we get them into that position when we have vested interests pushing from the other direction? All the information's been published, it's all in the public domain, but it hasn't been packaged up in a way that people can digest because it has to compete with all the other communication that's out there.
Yes. You're not only producing funny videos that are getting viral on internet, you're also really trying to get the science at core of the decision making. And you're now up to something special in United Kingdom at the Parliament. Can you tell us about these science briefings you're planning?
Sure. So my work has been trying to connect people with the science, because science are these critical messengers, and we use comedy to package that up. This is quite different, but my brother. So when I was in manufacturing, I worked with my brother. So we've had a long history of working together. He's also a climate campaigner, and he'd come to the conclusion where our paths essentially intersected, because his idea was to model something on the COVID briefings where there was a moment when science was suddenly taken incredibly seriously. And his thought is, okay, we need to do something like this on climate, or more pertinently, the government should be doing something like this on climate. So we're effectively going to lean into behaving like the government. We've hired Westminster Central Hall, which was the venue of the first ever UN meeting in 1946, I think it was. And we have 8 experts doing very punchy, science driven, but very easy to digest and not overloaded by charts and graphs, talks covering every single aspect of the crisis. So, whilst a lot of climate communication concentrates on the global warming and it concentrates on the biodiversity crisis, we're going to cover the whole range of issues that affects people's lives. So we're going to cover food security, national security, health, and very importantly, economics. What's critical there, and I think this is the case, certainly in the UK, but internationally, is climate conversations in the media, when they do take place, often end with, well, ordinary people can't afford this, or, well, the government has no money. What is never said is the cost of inaction, and what is never discussed are the incredible benefits of decarbonisation. Here in the UK, our own climate change committee has pointed out it's nearly 40 billion a year, every year, that we would save through decarbonisation. So there are some really powerful arguments if you wrap them up and deliver them in this really cohesive way, which we intend to do. The room will also contain people who have the ear of Britain, so from finance, from insurance, from banking, from music and the arts. So it's the whole range. The event will be filmed, and a film of the event will be rolled out nationally in 2026.
We love to share that film because we really can. I believe this should be done in all parliaments. I myself, my background is from finance, not manufacturing, and finance is really the key for the climate crisis. And for me, it's so I'm still shocked that the finance industry are not really taking this into the way they see risk. I mean, some are doing it, some insurance experts, etc., etc. But the broader finance, they are not just there. And if they really understood and will participate in this emergency briefing, I think they will act differently, because the risk of not acting will cost so much compared to investing in the right things so we avoid that risk. And for me, it's so, I don't understand why the finance industry are so dumb in this, because they used to be very good at calculating risk. But I think it's all about us. We need to communicate it better. So it's not only science, it's also the cost of science and the profit of science. And I rather focus on the later, because if we use science for good, we will make a lot of money, and that's good for humanity, if we can do it in a way where we not destroy nature. I must ask you one question though, after I have watched this film. Will you have like stand-up comedy as part of this emergency briefing, or will it be very serious?
No, this is extremely serious. We're trying to, those people you just described. I've worked with people like that, and I think it's understandable. There is a common held belief that business as usual, with some tweaks, is going to suffice. And I think that relates to, going back to your science issue, it relates to a deficit in understanding of what the risks that we face really mean. So if you notice, people are talking about grandchildren when they talk about having to act. And often we hear about coral reefs, or maybe not so much now, but polar bears. And so everything is partitioned off into a distant problem that may happen in the future. And also, there's another illusion that is common in the UK, specifically, where we have great talk, but our action doesn't back it up. So the Climate Change Act was groundbreaking. Setting the targets we've done was worthy of applause. But our position, that's built around a 50% reduction in emissions since 1991, is more or less illusionary, because we, of all the industrialized nations, have offshored more heavy industry than just about anyone else. So those emissions still exist. And as the scientists will tell you, physics does not respect borders, so they're still there. We also don't include aviation. We don't include shipping. We don't, we don't include Drax power station, which are our single biggest source of emissions, burning timber from actually from the USA. So, we're living under a slight illusion that we're doing really well, and we also have budgets that are really out of date. So the current budgets only require tiny, I think it's 1% cut until we reset them, but that's not for a good few years, and we don't have time to wait until that point. So if you talk to many people in these sectors, they're laboring under the illusion that we've done 50% when it's more like 0.6% a year. And they also think that we're ahead of the game. And then we have the arrival of carbon capture and storage, which, even if it succeeds in capturing 90%, it's completely ignoring all the upstream methane leakage and the fact that we'll be importing US LNG, which is worse than coal. So it's a muddied.
What I think is so genius about your initiative here is that you're not going to give member of UK Parliament your opinion. You're going to give them the hard facts. And just because we haven't take things in calculation when we do the carbon accounting doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And if you don't do the right accounting, your company will go bankrupt. So we need to get all facts on the table. It's just the facts. And you can do politics about how to act on those facts. And I have seen you have an incredible lineup of really knowledgeable people in this emergency gathering. We will put forward a link to it in tomorrow's newsletter. But the biggest question here, how will you make sure that member of parliaments really will show up, and not only the ones that support climate action today, but the ones that really need to learn this?
That's going to be occupying all our thinking time between now and the 27th of November. But at the moment, it's looking quite possible because we are very clear that this is non-political. This is science-driven. There isn't a political agenda here. That's point number one. But the second point is we're building this incredible coalition of support from people like the National Trust to the Church of England to groups right across the UK who in turn are going to call on their supporters to lobby their MP to attend. And I think, if we pitch it right, it's non-political, it's science-based, and it isn't just the sort of ethereal climate information they're used to about parts per million of CO2. This is all about how it affects British life. So all our speakers are working with the same brief. Take all the science that you are the lead on, but bring it back home to how this affects normal people's lives, which is what I think policymakers need when they're making these decisions. And that's why we included national security and food. We have some really powerful lectures on food and health. And those are the things, if you remember in COVID, when we had shortages in supermarkets, it really reaches people at this point. It's the same.
Everyone was buying toilet paper here in Sweden, so we ran out of it.
It's the same.
We're running out of time.
Okay.
So we are going to invite you on our future shows because we really want to follow your initiative here before, during, and after it's executed. I just have one final question. How is this? Is it this well received in UK among the politicians left and right? Are people liking this, or are there some hating it? Because I think if you will doing this in US today, it will be impossible.
At the moment, incredibly well received. I think obviously we are shifting faster than people may think into that sort of US model. So I'm sure there'll be some haters there, but we're not trying to reach the haters. We're trying to reach the middle. So people who aren't in the bubble and are maybe thinking it's something for generations to come. And we're trying to reach those people and explain it's the here and now they need to act.
I wish you an enormous success. And I have one digital gift for you before we go to the next programming. This is what we give to people and companies and organizations doing something amazing, something great, and you definitely deserve this, and your brother and all the team as well. And I hope if not me, someone from my team will participate in the emergency briefing, and I will make sure you receiving this in person.
We certainly hope so. Thank you very much.
It's amazing what you do.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for joining us, and good luck on the journey.
Really appreciate it. Thanks, Ingmar.
So with that, we are done here in Stockholm, and we're going over the ocean and joining our studio in Manhattan at the Nest Climate Campus. Nick, are you there?
Definitely here, Ingmar. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, that's really fantastic.
How is the kind of mood in New York today? Or everyone hangover after yesterday's big party, or what's going on?
Yesterday's big party. How many big parties are there happening here? I must have missed them all. I think, it's been really interesting. I'm sure everybody's read and heard that, more countries put down revised, improved national climate action plans, NDCs as they're called, and China putting down their emission reduction plan for the first time. And although some people think it wasn't enough, China could have done more. It's kind of in China's DNA that they tend to put down a low ambition action and then overperform. So to see China actually emission reductions on the table, guaranteed across all gases, and this is important, Ingmar, these are across all gases for many, many countries. So methane's in there now, some of the super pollutants that we've illuminated over many, many episodes in the last few years, they're in many countries' national climate plans quite clearly stated. So I think, I don't know how you're gauging it, but it seems to me that this is not a glass half empty, it's a glass half full. And we can build on some of the things coming out of New York Climate Week.
Yeah, I mean, it's very positive, and it's also Colombia going to host a fossil fuel phase-out conference, and they are an oil country, so things are really not, I mean, things are moving in the wrong direction, but things are really moving in the right direction. And regarding countries that are having targets they overperform, I like that much better, because it's all about how you deliver on your targets. I mean, if you're a corporation that's traded on the stock markets always love when you have a good target, and if you over deliver, they don't like if you under deliver. But we need all to step up both the target and the delivery in order to really make it. But here comes the super pollutants, methane and other gases that can really give us more time. So I know we're going to focus on that on the show, that there is actually, if we limit those gases, we can cool the planet with up to minus 0.5 degrees if we focus on that. Doesn't replace decarbonization, but it gives us more time. And that's why I'm super happy to hear that that is now starting to get in the NDCs and in the hard commitments from many countries. Because
that's right.
Why should we have methane if we can avoid it? It's really a low-hanging fruit. So I'm looking forward for that. So I think I need to hand over to you now, so you have the time to focus on all those exciting topics.
I think you're doing, Ingmar. You were having an exciting time before. Now we need to move on to what's happening here in Manhattan. So thanks a lot. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. So thanks very much indeed, Ingmar and the Stockholm team. Welcome back, everybody, to the Climate Hub, our studio in the Nest Climate Campus here at New York Climate Week 2025. We have a fantastic lineup for the rest of the day, and so let's jump right in. When it comes to climate change and extreme weather and many other activities happening on our planet, no single country can actually go it alone. They need science, they need international cooperation, they need to understand collectively what is happening to our world and plan for that if they're going to be sensible about it, and also work out how they're going to actually manage any downsides here. In other words, resilience, adaptation, when you think about climate change. The World Meteorological, whoa, I just said that wrong. The World Meteorological Organization is at the center of these efforts concerning scientists, governments, and communities around the world, working with many, many, many partners. But many of us are also unaware of the critical work in some ways that WMO does, not just for international scientific organizations, but for you and me. When you think about the food that comes on our tables every day in many parts of the world, or sometimes doesn't, right? When you think about, holidays, are you going to go somewhere or not? Meteorological services. When you think about so many different parts of our economy, our lives, how we work and how we play, the World Meteorological Organization is part of that, again, with many, many partners. So we've got two fantastic guests with us from the WMO. Let's do the acronym now, because I'm tripping over meteorological. And I have with me two wonderful guests. Mike Sparrow, Chief of the World Climate Research, WMO, and Daniel Kuhl, Director Development Partnerships for the WMO as well. So great to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's maybe get a quick snapshot of what actually the WMO is and what it actually does. So we'll put that on the table for the viewers. Who would like to kick off? Okay.
I'll start, Nick, if that's all right. Thank you very much. So the WMO is all about weather, water, and climate. And the three of those, of course, are very interconnected because as the climate changes, it affects the weather and it affects the water systems as well. So it's looking at everything from flash floods to droughts, for example. But we also, of course, we look at the infrastructure, the observations for everything that goes on. We look at the science, and in my case, looking at the climate science, and of course, the services and the products that are produced for policymakers all the way through to farmers or ski resort managers or everything like that.
Okay, Daniel?
Yeah, and I would just add to that
are we okay with the microphone here,
is this
everybody?
microphone
It's
working?
absolutely fine.
Okay.
Thank you. It's just not hearing it.
yeah,
Up
you.
to the mouth.
Thank you. I would just add to that I mean, we're a member-driven organization. So we count 193 countries as our members, represented by the directors of the national meteorological services of each country. And our core function, which we were established over 150 years ago, remains the same, is to help them coordinate data sharing globally. Because of course, to forecast the weather, predict climate, forecast floods where you live, you need to know what's happening in your neighborhood and around the world. So that's sort of one of our core mandates, is to make sure all the countries are sharing data in a very sort of systematic, regulated, consistent manner, so everyone can use that data and ingest it into whatever models they need to produce their forecasts.
So I suppose the WMO in the outset was, as you say, meteorological services, sharing data, sharing knowledge. Some of that data in the old days would have been paper-based. Now it's digitally based and things like that. But there came a moment, did there not, in this whole journey in the late 1980s, where climate change was something that people were speculating about, wondering about. Some science was showing it's a serious thing we need to deal with. Others said, well, maybe not, but let's have a global assessment. And I think it was the heads of the WMO and the UN Environment Programme meeting in Nairobi, round the back of conference room 1 there, who went, let's set up this international panel on climate change, this intergovernmental panel on climate change. So it's suddenly a big step change because you're moving from meteorological services into the even bigger picture of the whole climate story. Is that roughly correct what happened?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I will say I'm a little bit biased here, but I'm not a meteorologist. I'm an oceanographer.
Right.
That's my background. And even if you want to try and predict the weather accurately in terms of weeks or longer, you need to understand what the oceans are doing. And of course, if you want to understand the climate, you've got to look at the whole system of the Earth. So it's not just about what's happening in the atmosphere. It's what's happening in the oceans, what's happening in the ice-covered regions, for example, if you want to make good predictions going forward. So of course, yes, as you say, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is the assessment of all of the science that's going on. And part of what we do is provide those predictions, those projections about how our climate is going to change over the next 100 years or longer as we move forward.
And within that, within these kinds of processes, what's the step change, it strikes me, has been that, in a sense, it moved from what do we know about climate change based on the peer review research? What do we know based on your partners? the work you do, Mike, others, right? Oceanography, all this inputs coming in to, okay, well, what are the implications of this in terms of impacts? And then evolved into, well, does this mean for economies? What does it mean for farmers and businesses? What does it mean to you and me? And what do we do about it? Yes, we can cut the emissions, but we might have to do some other things too, like build some kind of resilience against some climate change that maybe we no longer can fully control, right? So it's a kind of fascinating journey, and it gets us back again into a sense that these big assessments are not just about kind of loving of scientists over data, if I can put it that way. It's actually about practical uses, yeah? So I mean, you alluded to this before, but try and expand that a little bit for how you serve these different communities with the knowledge that you generate. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you. I mean, there's 2 points I want to raise on this. One is, we're very much transitioning to more of an impact-based approach. So of course, we do the science to say what the weather and the climate will be, but it's more also for the users what the weather and climate will do. What is the impact going to be, and what do people need to do to either respond to that or adapt to it or somehow manage whatever risks are inherent with the weather coming along? That's one big issue. I think the other thing I want to raise is that we also want to do this across timescales. And actually this month, actually next week, or maybe it's even this week, is sort of the 10-year anniversary of a famous speech by Mark Carney, who's now the Canadian Prime Minister, called The Tragedy of the Horizon, where when he was the governor of the Bank of England, he said, where financial decision-making and political decision-making timescales are a bit out of sync with the 100-year projections of the climate. So we need to cover those horizons, whether it's the immediate future, now casting weather forecasting for early warning systems and so on, the next couple months and seasons, also for agriculture, water resource management, energy demand, and all that. And of course, going further and further out for climate adaptation, mitigation, and policymaking.
Could I add to that? Yeah, I mean, Daniel's absolutely right, of course. So, and this is where the blurring between the weather and climate occurs, because, we work on timescales from, months through to, years, tens of years, even up to thousands of years in the future, because all of these different timescales are important. And particularly those timescales and the months to sort of seasonal outlooks, because it's not just, if you're a sub-Saharan farmer in Africa, these are crucial things because you need to know when to plant your crops, etc. But also, if you run a ski resort in Canada, you need to know, to invest when you're going to hire people, to when the ski resorts can be open, etc. In fact, we are also starting to work a lot more with the finance community, because everyone from reinsurance people to asset managers are also looking at, the climate affects what they do as well going forward. So, it's the group of individuals that need this kind of information is huge.
And I mean, do you, these are obviously world-class, unbelievable assessments, right? And so many people involved that they naturally, in a sense, balance out some political biases that would exist in the world if it was just a product from Europe, or the USA, or, I don't know, Singapore. So that makes it very special. Do you sometimes get frustrated that you're just laying on the table, I'm sure you've had this question before, laying on the table the kind of scientific reality of the world, and that even though the politicians often sign these documents off, that the reaction is not quite as bold as it might be? I mean, is that a frustration the scientific community has fundamentally?
Our role, at least our role in WMO, is to provide that scientific evidence, that robust scientific evidence, that you can see unequivocally that climate change is occurring. That's a fact. It's not, we've known since the 19th century that if you put carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, you will warm the planet. That is pure scientific fact, in the same way as, gravity exists as a scientific fact. And of course, you provide this information, and we provide this information in a form as best as we can that's of use to policymakers. And they then work with this information. They're the ones who have to produce outcomes from this and change the way that their governments or their countries actually adapt or mitigate the effects of climate change. and obviously you can go as a personal level in terms of saying, oh, yes, I find it frustrating that things aren't moving as quickly as they could do. But, that's, we have to be careful about our role is to provide that robust science.
Yeah. But maybe what you're indicating is that you get the global assessments and the scientists who are part of it, in a sense, they're in their own countries, right? And they have maybe better access to the political structures there to inform them what decisions they need to make. So it goes from the ground up, and from the top down, the satellites, but it goes from the top up and the bottom up into this middle area of international cooperation and evaluation and assessments. And then it goes back to the nations to decide what they're going to do and what is politically possible or what they think is politically possible in that given time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I want to add to that, to what Mike said. Also, when thinking about operational forecasting, I mean, WMO coordinates this relatively invisible backbone of a global public good. There's always, centers running in the background. We're coordinating it. There's observations being made. There's forecasts being produced. And it's a bit taken for granted because you open the app on your phone, you see a forecast. You don't think, well, behind that, there is 193 countries sharing data and informing that forecast. And generally, it's okay that it's taken for granted. But I think also in a lot of the conversations we're having with big sectors like finance, we're saying, well, build your models and your business on top of our data and our forecasts, but don't assume we're as robust as we would like it to be.
Yeah.
There sort of needs to be a recognition that this is a treasure, an invisible treasure that everyone depends on.
Yeah.
So help us advocate that it stays strong and stays functional.
Well, I think you turned the conversation very nicely there to this other, we're kind of halfway through our show right now. Maybe it is worth bringing up the fundamental issue. What happens if governments start withdrawing from global, assessments, right? I mean, what is the potential impact on these big global assessments, the models that come out, and also the recommendations? And because does it create a problem? Is a problem? Yeah.
So, I mean, absolutely, it's a problem because, if you're going to produce models, whether it's models of the weather or models of the climate moving forward, those are based on observational data. You have to be able to ensure your models are robust, that they produce good results, and you need the observations on the ground from the National Met Services, for example, or the institutions around the world. And if you end up having gaps in that data, it affects the robustness, how good the predictions and the projections are that we are able to work with, which has an effect on government policy, etc. And as Daniel said, these are all linked. It's not if we start having gaps from certain countries, then that causes problem for everyone, because we end up not having the information that we actually need to produce these products that people use and they need.
So in other words, I mean, there's nothing called perfection. These are all risk assessments often, or they're the best scientific basis for making a decision about what you do. But there's always a few percentage you can't really control, right? So that's life. But if you take out partners with a high capacity for observation, maybe people that own satellites and things like that, you're going to end up with a much more imperfect ability to weather forecast, and also to when it comes to big climate assessments, right? It's always going to have, it's not going to be quite as perfect as it could be if everybody's in and full power on the on this problem. Yeah.
Yeah. In particular, also you mentioned satellites. I mean, when we think of Latin America, they are, for their weather forecasting, thinking also of hurricanes in the Caribbean, they're dependent on the satellites from one country.
Yeah.
And if that country decided,
the United States.
Yeah. And if the United States decided to stop sharing that data, there'd be a real problem in Latin America. And we're talking about lives and livelihoods here.
Yeah. No, this is getting to the nub of it. I mean, there's also the issue of the developing countries. You mentioned Latin America. I mean, I hate this. I work for the United Nations, so I'm allowed to say I hate developing and developed countries, because it's much more interesting than that, right? But there's poorer countries and richer countries, maybe. I don't know. I mean, there are some very mature economies now in Latin America, as there are growing in Africa. But there's still parts of the world where they need the richer countries to also support them in this data gathering as well, right? For their own people, but also, again, for the international cooperation and data sharing. And again, this comes back to the funding of their meteorological services in various countries. And I know that can go up and down. So it's not just whether one country or another country withdraws access to the satellite data, whatever. It's also how richer countries pay their overseas development aid. And I think it's not just the US, but also Europe and many parts of the world. This is going down right now, which may have some impact on these very services that you're talking about. Do you notice that? Do you hear that in your partnerships?
Well, I think one thing to note is that, of course, satellites have the huge advantage that they have global or near global coverage. But they are not. They have to be calibrated. You have to compare them to observations on the ground. So it's still crucial that you have those observations in the African continent or in Latin America or globally, in order to make sure that the satellites are giving the correct answers and the inputs to the models, etc. So it's all kind of interconnected. And of course, we have the geopolitical situations where some countries are becoming more isolated in many respects, but they still rely on the fact that you need a global effort in order to be able to predict weather, to predict climate, to be able to predict water resources as we move ahead.
Exactly. So the weather forecasts in Europe have to understand what's going on in Africa in the Congo Basin or something like that, and what's happening in the Caribbean and the Arctic. Yeah.
Yeah, and talking specifically about supporting developing countries and building capacities, of course, we see the global context of overseas development aid reducing. But in our little niche corner of development, the impact isn't so great yet from my observations. We have the big climate funds stepping in, and the Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, some smaller ones, the CRUISE is one, the Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems Initiative, or SOF, the Systematic Observation and Financing Facility. They're all stepping up to fill those gaps.
Right.
Also, we work a lot with the development banks who see this as a priority. So we do see investment coming and moving.
That's positive, yeah.
But it's challenging. Modernizing a weather service is really challenging. And in some countries, like we're working in Somalia, the weather service is one person. And like it's been established 1 year ago. So
one person needs
to build
putting
that
his thumb out of the window and seeing which way the wind is blowing. I'm not being
and I think another one of the challenges we're seeing is in a sense, for least developed countries, it's easier to get funding because grants are available. Middle income countries also have a lot of needs, but generally in the global system, they don't have access to grants. They're loans.
Right.
And the government tends not to then prioritize this area of work. There's other priorities to take loans for infrastructure and education and health, which is all understandable. But we see in our membership a real challenge in middle income countries just to get a little bit of support.
Right. Okay.
I can add to that. I think a key thing that Daniel said is yet, where perhaps we're not seeing an impact yet, but we will see an impact. When you come back to the issue of looking at how climate changes, you need long-term observations over many years, over 30 years, over 20, 30, 40 years or longer. And of course, if you stop taking those measurements because you can't afford to, then you lose those valuable data sets. So you can't see how things are changing over the longer time period. And that has an effect on our ability to see what's going to happen in the future.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, there are other players and actors who are also stepping up. The foundations in particular are starting to really recognize the criticality of climate services for health, agriculture, energy, and so on. So we are increasingly talking to some of the big well-known foundations who are interested, like Gates Foundation and Rockefeller and so on. And they are putting their money where their mouth is and really investing in this. And we see some, I hate to use this term, very UN-ish, non-traditional donors.
Yes.
A lot of the Gulf states are starting to also mobilize resources to support countries in Africa to strengthen their systems for weather forecasting.
Okay, it's good that that's happening because it's always been a big challenge, I know, for the UN system to cultivate what is known as West Asia. Again, another artificial term. It's only called the Middle East, because the British decided it was east of Britain. So West Asia is perfectly fine, but it sometimes confuses people. Yeah. Sorry.
I think I will add, I'm glad my colleague here is very optimistic, and I am to a large extent.
No, it's good. You can play good cop, bad cop here.
But I would say that certainly on the shorter time period, it certainly has a major impact on the science that's been done, whether that's in an individual country or and it's not just the World Climate Research Program, but other organizations that are focused on the science. We're looking at a sort of 60% cut in our income for science activities over the next few years at the moment.
Right,
And
that's serious.
we are looking at other ways of raising funds. I'm working closely with Daniel on this, for example. But certainly in the shorter term, it is having an impact about the kind of studies we can do, which are used to improve these models and understand how the climate will change in the future.
Yeah, again, it's super hard as well. I mean, I can remember in my days at UNEP, going with the head of UNEP at the time, the former German Environment Minister, Klaus Topfer, going to see the British government. And he said, we have 2 minutes to capture her attention. I mean, when you say something like, we need money to improve the models that we've already got, they go, well, they've already got the models. Why do they need to improve them? And then it's like the argument's lost because we've got time to actually explain, well, no, that's actually quite important. Sorry, but do you know what I'm saying? Yep. Science is sometimes very hard to communicate sometimes to politicians, the importance of it. And yet, if you didn't have it, they'd certainly start feeling the heat, right?
Yeah, and what I'm saying in my work is getting money for the service end of the value chain. So early warning systems, health systems, heat warning systems, that's not easy, but it's doable.
Yeah.
At a very sort of at a projectized level.
Yeah.
Getting funding for the core infrastructure, and I mean the global infrastructure, which is not just hardware, it's also software and coordination and expertise, and getting money for the science behind all of this, that is somehow more difficult because again, it's invisible, right?
Yeah.
Early warning systems, you see it, or you see a heat warning system in refugee camps and seeing people's lives being saved. And so that's easy to sort of say, look, this, you're going to save lives with this.
Exactly.
Where it's
There's
like, well, we
direct
need a
link
couple more
between the money,
stations.
the infrastructure and the lives. They can see the direct, exactly. But when you say, well, if we didn't have this, maybe, oh, it's only maybe. So, I can see this. But I mean, if you lose, the staffing of people of these great institutions as well, which we don't have to comment on it, but in NOAA, for example, in the US, if you lose thousands of jobs or something, that also makes it more difficult to actually just simply process the data, right? So then haven't got the flow of data coming through and things like that. And I mean, I think the problem is in these times, many of the national governments feel very stressed in terms of their own budgets. But what about the private sector? I mean, again, agriculture, we've mentioned several times here. This must be of great interest to, the food companies, Nestle, Unilever, you name it. Do you see any interest in what you're doing and any support that could come from the private sector? Maybe this could be an avenue.
So yeah, we're seeing increasing interest, but we're also seeing a bit of a wicked problem in that they're used to getting this for free. Also because in theory they pay their corporate taxes and that money should support these systems. So it's to make that mind shift. We can't charge for the data,
right?
And even if we could, we wouldn't want to. I mean, we want it to be in the public domain.
Yeah.
So it's more of looking for goodwill out of the private sector, and that's a bit more of a difficult conversation. That really needs an understanding of why this is important and why even a small contribution can make a huge difference.
Exactly.
I think it also requires more of a two-way conversation. I mean, one of the good things that have come out about the fact that we have less money is the fact that we are talking more to the private sector, and it can't be just, please give us some money so we can produce our models. As you said, that's not very that's not a good selling point.
Yeah.
But we can talk to them saying, what do you use our models for? What do you need from that information? How can we do this better? It's the kind of conversation we'd be having this week with different private sector organizations.
Yeah.
So of course we have to maintain our independence, our scientific integrity, but that doesn't mean that if an organization has a particular interest on, heat stress in a certain region or the worry about how can we improve our predictions about rainfall in certain regions because it affects food security, for example, then of course we can work with the private sector, and we should be doing more of that in the future.
We have to wrap up here. We're exactly on 30 minutes. We could have talked a lot longer. It's very interesting indeed, but hopefully that was a helpful conversation as well, because I think for the viewers, they learned a little bit more about the World Meteorological Organization, also how special it is and the work that you do, working with so many people around the world, and what they might lose if there is a cutback in all this. And it's very important that people become aware of that and just don't take this for granted. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So welcome back. We've spent quite a few shows in the last year or so looking at super pollutants, looking at methane. So I hope many people in our audience at least can remember why methane is so important in the climate story. We know it's a superheater of the atmosphere, but we know that it's actually relatively short-lived, certainly when compared with carbon dioxide. And somehow, if we could just get rid of it rather quickly, maybe we might even be able to halve emissions by 2030, possibly, but at very least, we would actually slow things down a bit and give us a chance for the rest of the economy, in a sense, to catch up, the broader decarbonization to be delivered. There's a new report out on this and many other things linked with methane from the Climate Crisis Advisory Group. We know them, by the way, because we've had Sir David King, the former British chief scientist, on the show in Dubai with members from this group. And they've got a new report out. I think it's called the Emergency Brake, might well be, yeah. And we've got two of the report's authors with us here live in the studio. We have Fatima Denton, Director, United Nations University, INRA. You're Fatima? What's the INRA?
It's the Institute for Natural Resources in Africa.
Ah, okay. So you're based.
INRA, yeah.
Okay, and you're based in Africa?
Yes, I'm based in Ghana. In Accra.
Okay. All right. And then we've got Tessa Hill. She's a professor, University of California, Davis. So that's University of California is a big thing. There's certain places where it all is, and you're in Davis.
That's right. I'm actually based at our marine research facility out on the coast north of San Francisco.
Okay. Well, I've been to San Francisco. I was there as the director of comms for the Global Climate Action Summit in 2018.
I was also there.
Ah, okay. There we go. And I also once lived in Africa, working
wow.
for UNEP in
Where?
Nairobi. So
Oh,
now we're all
Nairobi.
connected. So the title of this report, ladies, is Methane, the Emergency Brake for Climate Heating. What are you trying to say with this title?
You want to go first?
I'll start and then I'll hand to Fatima.
Yeah.
Yes, so the advisory group has released this report and it's exciting. It's exciting to be able to talk about this because of the reasons you brought up in your intro. Methane is an extremely powerful greenhouse gas, many times more powerful than carbon dioxide, but it's also very short-lived in the atmosphere. So what that means is, while it might feel at the moment that our foot is on the accelerator of climate change with greenhouse gas emissions, reducing methane emissions is really pulling the emergency brake.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the ability to really make a huge impact on future warming by reducing methane emissions quickly.
Okay. Fatima?
Yeah, and I would just say that our carbon budget is very much depleted. So we need a complement. And I think methane has some very obvious wins, I'd say, some which Tessa just mentioned in terms of emissions reductions and the fact that it's also very potent and you can actually feel the effect quite quickly. But I think in addition to that, it could be a development accelerator also, especially for countries in the global south. Some of them are trying to get energy security right. They're trying to get food security right. And if you take Africa, for instance, it's a region whereby it's going to grow to close to 2.5 billion by 2050. And therefore, the amount of people that will be coming from rural areas to the city, we already have some mega cities. Nairobi is one of them, DRC and Lagos others, it means that a lot of the waste, organic waste, will make clean cities almost an impossible task. So if we can, take advantage of that by reducing methane now in cities, in agriculture and energy, those are all good things for development. So we have ancillary benefits as well as the climate abatement benefits as well.
Okay. So we can dig a little bit more into these wider things, but are there a few other headline points that you would like to raise from the report? Like sometimes reports have like 5 or 10 big points that they want to get out. Fatima?
For me, I think the real winner in the report is around the area of clean cooking.
Right.
Because that's a really sore issue for most countries in Africa. Biomass is the dominant fuel.
Yeah.
Some countries have transitioned into LPG gas, but it has to be subsidized. And most people in rural areas cannot afford the subsidy. So if we can get smarter and more efficient in terms of clean cooking, then we will be reducing the amount of people that die every year from respiratory illnesses. We'll be giving a lot of women, time, because a lot of time is spent looking for firewood. And I think also, there will be some real, clean air sort of benefits as well.
And where does the methane come in on that?
Because a lot of the energy used, biomass energy, has methane, so black smoke.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So that's where it comes from.
Right.
Just that the energy resources in that part of the world are not clean.
Yes.
So the more you use firewood, and also there's a problem of deforestation. Africa is one of those regions where a lot of
methane releases from
yes,
that. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I love the point that Fatima just made. I'll endorse that. And also, I'll pull out another high-level point from the report. Methane emissions can come from both natural sources and anthropogenic sources. So in terms of anthropogenic sources...
Anthropogenic being man-made?
Man-made, human-made.
Or women-made as well.
That's right. So we think about those in sort of 3 sectors: agricultural, energy, and waste management. And those are on the rise. So our emissions from those sources are rising. Interesting thing, methane also comes from some natural sources. So one of the biggest of those are wetlands. And as we increase emissions to the atmosphere through our human activities, actually there's a positive feedback. So as the earth warms and precipitation patterns change across the planet, those wetlands actually release more methane.
Right.
And so the problem actually worsens even through those natural sources. So again, going back to the point that we talked about at the beginning, by decreasing our methane emissions through human activities, we can also sort of wind back that natural process as well. So we're dealing with some feedbacks in the climate system.
So the kind of co-benefits or whatever, it's like the biggest source of mercury in the world is coal-fired power stations, burning coal. So if you switch off coal-fired power stations, you've got less mercury in the environment, but less greenhouse gas emissions. There's a double whammy benefit sort of thing.
For sure.
Okay. So maybe we can think about what to do about all this. I mean, there must be recommendations in the report. I see that yesterday, with the summit held by the UN Secretary General, more countries put down their new national climate action plans. China even an emission reduction plan, which is wow. Okay, that's moving forward. And many are including all gases, so methane and maybe some of the other super pollutants. So there is clearly some kind of energy in doing something, right, among the countries. We've got the Global Methane Hub. We've got all these initiatives. There's maybe going to be a big summit in Belém at the next climate conference in Brazil on this topic. So there is movement. So I think you identify the areas. So waste tips or landfills, agriculture, oil and gas industry, another one which you didn't mention, but we have to mention. And there's a fourth one. No,
those are the major
main
ones.
sources.
Some people might include coal, coal methane from some places, but it tends to get forgotten. But so how do we bring this methane down? Because of course, the other thing in your report, I think, says if we don't manage methane, we may lose the ability to manage climate change quite rapidly. Otherwise, that's the negative side. It could just go rocketing up. Yeah. Who'd like to go?
I'll kick it off.
Okay.
And I'll kick it off with energy. So the main source of methane coming out of the energy system from fossil fuels are actually leaks and flares that are not completely combusting the methane. And so actually this is sort of a win-win. Basically, the main recommendation of the report is that the issue of leakage from the fossil fuel industry really needs to be dealt with and actually would account for a very large proportion of the global methane emissions that we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with Tessa. The only sort of qualifier I want to add is this is also very much dependent because you're talking about what we're going to do in terms of management. But I think it means we have to look at the management tools that we've got. What are the mechanisms? What are some of the solutions that are there? If you take again Africa as an example, you'd see that, for instance, a lot of what we might need to be able to verify and to account for, how much methane we have would really require an infrastructure to be able to monitor and verify. So the verification process, the monitoring process, the regulatory framework, all of those things are not well set up in many African countries. And so building that infrastructure will come with a cost. And this is already a continent that is contributing barely 4% to global emissions. So where's the money going to come from? So I feel that in as much as Africa can really count a number of good development co-benefits from methane emissions and reductions, it shouldn't also have to shoulder the responsibility of what countries in the north have done, especially in terms of historical emissions. So we need to be able to look at aspects of technology transfer. We need to be able to look at aspects of climate finance and see where we sort of plug the gap on those ones so that, a northern mitigation ambition is not somehow transposed to countries that are already constrained in terms of meeting their own adaptation and mitigation.
No, they need support to act.
I will agree with that and actually add another interesting thing about reducing methane emissions is that in the past, from a scientific perspective, it was actually hard to track some of these emissions. And we relied on industries or sectors actually self-reporting, sort of bottom up, how much those emissions were. And that has really changed scientifically recently. So we actually now can track methane emissions through satellites. And so we have a much better platform now to think about methane, both from the calculating the inventories and thinking about reductions and making some targets that we actually can track whether we're getting there, and also providing the climate finance that's needed to support countries and industries to get there.
So absolutely, and that means that nobody can hide from the reality. I mean, I understand that even in Germany, for example, they get a lot of emissions from sort of waste areas. And they think they've got quite low emissions, but the satellites show that actually their emissions are quite high from these places because they're relying on the companies that manage the waste landfills to report the methane emissions. So the Germans have felt quite good about it, but now they realize from the satellites they're not. But on the African side, I mean, at least there's one good thing here. I mean, I understand with the oil and gas industry, so whether we're looking at Nigeria or Angola or Mozambique or something like that, there is no new technology, I think, that's needed to manage the leaks. It's a question of having the resources to do it. And so I suppose then must be a debate between private sector oil and gas companies and state-owned, and where the profits are or are not going. So there's a complexity of finance here. There could be some so-called blended finance, possibly. Well,
most of the oil and gas resources in many of those countries, especially big producers like Nigeria, like Angola, sort of privately owned. There are very few indigenous-based companies in Africa that own the resources. Governments give licensing and and they afford tax breaks, etc. But the bulk of those resources are managed by sort of multinational companies that come on board. But it's interesting that I just wanted to react to Tessa's point. It's interesting that we're talking about the energy sector and the leaks in that sector, because yes, we have to find ways to plug that leak, because every leak, it's coming at a cost. It's a waste of energy as well. And in a continent whereby we have over 600 billion people who do not have who do not have access to energy. That's a waste that we cannot afford. So the more we look at efficient ways to do that, the better. And also the fact that there could be some win-wins in terms of green industrialization. I mean, Africa can simply not industrialize in the same way that Europe, Asia, and Latin America did. So it has to industrialize in a smarter way, partly because we don't have the ecological bandwidth that would allow us to industrialize in that same way. So the more we can add more efficiency and avoid some of these leaks, the more we can potentially go green in our industrialization process.
And plugging leaks, can be a profit as well, can't it?
Yes, yes.
So it's could be not a cost, but a profit.
Yes.
And waste, you brought up waste before. I understand, obviously waste and methane emissions from organic. I visited waste pickers in Brasilia in March of this year, and they were separating all the plastics and the metals, but they were still not separating the organics, because they said, actually, we have no incentive to do this, but we'd like to do it. So it must be different in different countries, but there's clearly a big footprint of methane coming out of waste, tips or landfills. I don't know which term to use here.
Yes, for sure. To me, this feels like a real opportunity for people to sort of work within their community to improve methane emissions, because all of the organic waste, as you just pointed out, that's going to landfills or similar, actually could be, taken out of that landfill stream and put into a compost instead. And that actually removes the risk of methane emissions. And then if we're thinking on a little bit more of an industrial scale, it's also possible for those emissions to be collected and trapped at the landfill, and then the methane used as a fuel source. And so I think there's both a sort of industry change that could take place, but also for people who are trying to make change in their own, local communities, this is something that we actually can be doing locally.
I'm sure that in Africa, in the rural areas, they probably do compost,
Yes, they
just
do.
automatically.
Yes.
But it's in the cities where people don't know what to do,
Yes, exactly. But I mean, I think what Tessa said also makes a lot of sense, because, and that's why I refer to it as a development accelerator. If we do it properly, then there are some very real win-wins that we could really take advantage of. So that sort of extra energy use, being able to move to biogas, that those type of other energy sources, I think could be pretty beneficial also for rural population, but also for urban population as well, especially in a continent that is urbanizing at a very fast rate, as I mentioned, and whereby these services are going to be so critical, water, energy services in an urban city with more people coming is going to be quite important to be able to manage properly. So I think that for me, the vision, at least for Africa, is how do you grow, but how do you grow smarter with abatement policies, rather than kind of go all the way and have to come back and clean up. And more especially because there are just some real dividends there, as Tessa highlighted. And so, the benefits in terms of respiratory illnesses, clean air, the benefit in terms of food security, energy security, even from a livestock perspective, I think these are all benefits that we can.
You keep mentioning clean air, and I think there's some link between methane and, is it ground level ozone?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
methane does contribute to ground level ozone,
Right.
so therefore is contributing to human health effects.
Right. Okay. That's, yes. Good. So that brings that point out very clearly. Yeah. Yeah.
But there is an important I don't know if I should call it a paradox. There's an important paradox because you're talking about oil and gas earlier, but let's focus on a sector that is a growth sector for Africa, which is agriculture.
Yeah, I was going to come to that actually, because that was the other big sector. No, well done.
Okay.
Let's talk agriculture and methane.
Yeah, so I was just saying that in the agricultural sector, where it's actually, there's a yield deficit. Agriculture is not growing to the extent that one would expect in Africa. One of the reasons also is because of the low use of fertilizers. The more fertilizer you use, the more you will generate methane, especially in livestock and in paddy rice fields as well. So that to me is a problem area. So we really need to be able to see how the agricultural productivity is not lost as a result of methane use, so that it doesn't become a trade-off that then affects food security. Because with a continent that is going to grow to 2.5, you can't compromise food security. You need more food. The continent is already spending over $80 to $100 billion a year on food imports.
Yes.
So that's why it's so important that we don't necessarily see methane reduction in agriculture as something that is going to inhibit agricultural productivity.
Right.
It cannot be an inhibitor.
So it has to be. It's not that you're saying. It's not that you're saying no. We must make sure that this isn't going to compromise African agriculture. I mean, there could be other techniques, couldn't there? Could be more regenerative agriculture or more with the paddy fields. I think there are lots of solutions out there being tried in Vietnam and some of the Asian countries. Where I think use less water and there's some other tricks. But anyway, sorry, Tessa.
No, I think Fatima's point earlier about supporting Africa in a way that can grow better, taking these lessons and actually growing a more sustainable economy and agriculture can really be applied to the whole world. So we're trying to envision a better future where we're making smarter decisions about these things. And I do think in terms of agriculture, there are some bright spots, right? And so one of them is what you just brought up, that people are experimenting with different ways to grow rice that actually you still grow the rice, but you reduce the methane emissions. And there's a similar bright spot around animal feeds. So experimenting with different things that we feed animals.
Seaweed.
That's exactly
algae.
right. That's right. And I'm an oceanographer by training, so I'm excited about those seaweed solutions. And so I think thinking about what are the innovations that are going to help the world grow better, grow more sustainably. So we're not talking about reducing agriculture. We're talking about pivoting to more sustainable practices.
So I mean, we're now heading to the conference in Belém, and we're trying to work out whether we can afford to go there or not. But we have the United Nations Environment Programme, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and it now has two co-chairs. Before it was America and somebody else, and now it's Brazil and the UK. And so Marina Silva, the Environment Minister of Brazil, is nominally the co-chair of this initiative. So, I mean, it could well be, if those more national climate action plans, NDCs, whatever, revised with more all the gases in, and Brazil, I understand the UK is very keen to do something on this, the whole super pollutant thing, including methane. So there seems to be some energy that could happen there. I mean, what could be a good outcome there in terms of elevating? Would it be more support for Africa? Definitely one thing to actually manage down the methane challenge without compromising, as you say, agriculture. Would it be that there are some better targets put out by nations about what they want to achieve, particularly in the developed countries, and maybe some of the rapidly developing countries like India, China? I think China is quite interested in the methane story, particularly from their coal mines, strangely enough. Any thoughts about that? What where's the clapping going to come at the end of Belém on methane?
Well, I would say that most African countries would be very excited if concrete measures were put on the table, especially in terms of climate finance, because that is the one accelerator that we need in terms of scale, reach and depth. So I would say putting monies on the table would make sense, especially in the light of what we've also just discussed here, that some of these things would need legs. You need to be able to have those verification architecture Africa is struggling with the carbon verification, all the mechanisms and the standards that are required to say something is, can be counted as a carbon sink. So I don't think we need to add more. So I think
people are exhausted with more measures, aren't they?
Yes, so I think we need to make sure that those countries have the resources that they need so that they can take it further. But I think it's also important to think about the narrative.
Yeah.
Because I think that Tessa's talked about just how important it is that we see methane as a place where, or a greenhouse gas source that we can reduce in very short time scale. But that means that countries that need that are growing and growing fast, need to know that. They need to also grow with that sort of ideal and that vision, so that they can be able to see how they could also benefit. And as we've said, obviously there are development benefits in energy security, in clean cities, clean and sustainable cities. So we need to sell those. We need to really extract those benefits and say, countries that are growing, some of the countries in the north and China, they've grown already. So those things are known to them. But some of the countries in Africa, this is like one big attempt that they have to get development right. And getting development right means that you have to be very explicit about what are these benefits. And you also, as I said before, have to put the resources on the table so that your mitigation ambition doesn't become mine without the resources.
No, it has always been the case with the climate treaty. This point. Tessa, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add there, but I'll just say that, we talk about carbon dioxide a lot. We probably don't talk about methane enough. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. And I think generally what we're hearing this week is that those targets, those commitments that are being made around reductions are not aggressive enough, not assertive enough. And so I think part of what we're going to be looking for and hopefully clapping for are more convincing targets and commitments to reduce greenhouse gases.
Absolutely. And if we can, then maybe we can just, because if we don't halve emissions by 2030, the science says we only have a 50-50 chance of hitting net zero in 2050. And that means all this safety of climate action is out the window. We're into really uncharted territory. Everyone says we're in uncharted territory, but there's even more uncharted territory if we go beyond that, which won't be good for anybody, and obviously for Africa too, but for everywhere else. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being on We Don't Have Time TV. We will be in Belém broadcasting from the COP30 there. And this was a report that we were discussing called Methane, the Emergency Brake for Climate Heating. And that was orchestrated by the Climate Crisis Advisory Group with these two wonderful scientists and other scientists, I imagine, as well. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this next session on this last day, I believe, of We Don't Have Time during Climate Week New York. My name is Alexander. I am here on behalf of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, with which we have an exciting project, and we're going to talk about this in depth in over the next 25 minutes around NDCs, so those nationally determined contributions, and the role of the private sector in this whole endeavor. Now, to set a bit the scene before we go into the conversation here, we have a brilliant panel. There might actually be one more person jumping in the while we're recording here, but we'll see how this goes. So first of all, to the panel that we have here. So starting at the very far right, from my side at least, Christina Nimile-Ström, Global Head of Supply Sustainability in IKEA Group. Then we have Felipe Sanchez, who is the Country Partnerships Lead from Lead IT, and he will explain what that is in a second. And we have Fiona Duggan, who is the Global Sustainability Senior Manager at Unilever. So first of all, thank you all for coming here. Now, what are we actually doing here and where are we right now? So we are sitting here, as you might have guessed, in New York during Climate Week New York. Now, in parallel to this Climate Week, there's the UN General Assembly, where you might have heard some snippets or seen some videos because there have been some controversies, let's say, but also some progress. I would say so. Countries going out and announcing some of the targets, the 2035 targets, and beyond, hopefully as well. So there are a lot of talks on the level of NDCs on the country level. Now, what is often neglected is a country can set targets, but what actually has to happen for the country to work, to implement those targets? Well, eventually it's the private sector who has to work on implementing those targets. Let's say Brazil, let's say China and the EU have reduction targets, but ultimately the companies and the jurisdictions, they have to follow through on those targets. So that's why I'm very excited about this project here, which we're going to talk about in a second, where we are linking the corporate and national transition plans. Now, that's enough for an intro, at least from my side. I would like to turn to Christina first. Could you tell us a bit about, first of all, your role, of course, within IKEA Group, and then also about this project where we try to make the case for why it's important to link corporate and national transition plans?
Thank you, Alexander, and I will. So, Christina, I'm leading the sustainability agenda in IKEA as our supply part. And in IKEA, what we do, we are product developing and designing all the products. And then we are doing what my organization is doing, is supplying, producing the product from raw material procurement all the way to transporting the goods also to, say, the store. And then we're also having then the regional concept, the system of how we meet the customer. That is all within the IKEA Group. And then that is franchised out to the franchisees, who are the retailers, who maybe are the ones that you as a customer will actually meet. And then linked to your question then, why are the NDCs important for us in the private sector? At IKEA, we have a goal, as we all have, I believe, here, where we have set on course to halve our emissions by 2030 and go net zero by 2050. When setting those goals and working with that plan, we looked into all the vertical parts, if I call them like that, where do the emissions occur? So we've done full, of course, mapping of that and seeing that, okay, 52% is from material of the total emissions, 9% comes from production, we have 5% from transportation, and products used at home is 17%. And we have plans to, of course, to reduce those impacts all over. And we will do that, regardless of what. But we can only go that far. And that's where the NDCs come in, that to really harvest all the benefit out of this work, we need to work together with the governments. For instance, as I said, like going down for production, for instance, more renewable energy is very important. Yes, we are supporting our suppliers to do on-site production. We're working with renewable electricity purchase and so forth. Same if you see this with the products used at home. We do energy saving devices, for instance, and that can do more. But then we get to if the grid is not green, we need to see governments greening their grid. We need to see governments, for instance, supporting infrastructure for charging, for transportation, for land transportation. That's one thing. And also for the material agenda, we are in a transformation, all of us. For us, 52% comes from material. We need to go renewable. We need to go more recycle. So countries can also put, clearer definitions on what is waste, where can waste go, so we can actually get that valuable feedstock back into the system. And that's where we see also, policies from the governments very important to support businesses to do what we can do, and only then we can get to the full potential. And it's very important for us as a company, and I think for a country as a global brand. Sure, the same goes for Unilever as well. We are looking over our supply-based footprint all the time from a competitiveness point of view, sustainability reasons, or whatever are fair and equal and so forth. And of course, a country, if they have all these legislations and supporting tools in good shape, we can also do more business. So there is a business case, I think, also for the governments actually to get more corporate financing and activities in. So I see it's a win-win. We need to do this together, and we need to decide if we want to be on the right side of history together when we move this, because the challenges we face are immense and they're systemic in its nature. So we need to work together.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a great intro to this overall project, and something we've heard again and again over the last few UN COPs as well, these conference of parties. The business sector is often called upon to lead, because honestly, there's a bit of a leadership vacuum right now in politics. But at the same time, corporates can only go so far. So, Fiona, I know that you have recently also just released this week, I believe, a report that makes the same case around NDCs and how corporates or like the alignment of the NDCs with corporate transition plans is really, really crucial. Maybe you can quickly explain, of course, your role, Unilever's work, and then also how you fit into this project.
Sure, very happy to. Yes, we think the NDCs are incredibly important policy documents. They shouldn't be hidden away on some dusty old website in the back of the recesses of a government library. We think that they should be out in front. They should be seen as 5-year investment plans. And the reason that we think this is because, a bit like IKEA, we too have very strong targets, very strong climate ambitions. And we know that we can get only so far on our own. We need to work together with governments, with other businesses, with our suppliers, everybody who's part of this supply chain. So what does that look like exactly? How can corporates come to the table and say to governments, we want to pull together in the same direction? Well, I think we have a really good opportunity here for the next couple of months, because all the other governments and all the governments currently are figuring out what does a good and strong and effective NDC look like. And so what Unilever has done is we've written down in this report what we think a good and strong and effective NDC looks like. It has to be 1.5 aligned. It has to be sector-led. It has to be specific in the asks, because what corporates need is certainty and we need consistency, and that's incredibly important for us. But then on the other hand, governments often say, well, how exactly can you help us do this? So what we have done is we've listed all of the case studies of where we are either deliberately or accidentally or coincidentally reinforcing national climate plans. So for example, we've got projects on regenerative agriculture in Brazil. We've got projects on renewable energy in Indonesia. We've got projects again on renewable energy in India and Indonesia. And it's very, very important to be quite tangible and real about what we can actually do and where the actual gaps are. And I think it's really important that we focus on collaboration actually, but real collaboration. So that means meeting governments where they are, demonstrating where there's an overlap between climate transition action plans, and demonstrating where the policy levers are needed in order for us to go further and faster. And I think that's incredibly important at this day in time, because the next round of NDCs are supposed to be coming in this week, and many of them have, which is fantastic, but we are seeing some uneven ambition. So how do we up that ambition? And I think by giving the confidence and cover to people who are actually writing those NDCs to say, we are backing this. We have strong targets. We are putting in 150 million in our manufacturing decarbonization. This is real. We've got a 1 billion climate and nature fund. This is real. We want it to be real and we want it to go further. So that's some of the things we say in our report that we published this week.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's such a good way of putting it. So two things you touched upon. One is this, sometimes businesses almost accidentally stumble across something. It's just good business. It just makes sense for you, and or it has been part of your transition plan because you committed to decarbonize your supply chain. So you have to take action. But actually you realize then, wait a second, if I do this in this region, actually help the region as well to decarbonize.
I really want to underline that case. We're doing this because it's good for business. You know, it's good for growth, it's good for jobs, it's good for innovation. We need to have a sustainable supply chain over the next couple of years. Our company is built on making sure that we've got strong, consistent supply chains, and that is why we work on it. In our annual report, we say that climate change is a risk. We need to work on these risks. Our climate transition action plan is signed off by our shareholders.
Yeah.
They know that this is important and we need to work on it.
Yeah, it's something that I, in my work, really try to drive for more and more. A lot see the regulation as the sticks that drives companies to take action. And yes, like I take anything I can in terms of getting more corporates behind this movement, behind the transition. But ultimately, it's about their own business survival. It's about, do you still want to have a business that's relevant in 5 to 10 years? Regulation doesn't really matter there. It's really good business. And if we then can link it to the public sector and say, by the way, we help you to reach your NDCs, to accelerate also your own transition, that's of course brilliant. So Philippe, I want to turn to you next. In your work with Lead IT, and maybe you can give everyone a brief context for what Lead IT is actually doing. I haven't explained it here yet in my intro. You pretty much are at the intersection of countries and companies. So I'm curious from your work, from your experience, what is both the current sentiment and of course also your work in this space?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. So by way of introduction, I represent the Leadership Group for Industry Transition. So it's a coalition of 18 countries and 28 companies that are all focused on net zero emissions from heavy industry by 2050. And naturally, because we have companies and countries in our coalition, public-private partnerships are sort of at our heart. And just to explain a little bit, because when we're talking about steel and cement, the reason that public-private partnerships are so important is because the companies that we work with are upending the way things have been done. So for steel, the way things have been done for centuries; for cement, the way things have been done for millennia. So naturally, you need companies to come with the technology solutions and with the business models, but you need government to provide the enabling conditions that can both sort of promote that private and public investment into these fields. And in terms of sentiment, so to your question, our colleagues at the WBCSD, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, recently published a survey that they've done with business leaders, where they found that actually 91% of the business leaders they interviewed are maintaining the level of investment they had when it comes to the transition or increasing it. So for our members and those business leaders, the message is very clear. Now is not the time for government to change tack or to roll back the plans they have. They have to stick to them. In this sort of geopolitical uncertainty that we find ourselves in, the businesses do not need more uncertainty, right? They need less. So I think it's very important to make that point. And the other thing that WBCSD showed us is that actually in the areas where there is energy access, where there is infrastructure, and there is regulatory stability, investments are flowing to those places. So it just goes to show that much like with sailing, if you have a consistent and predictable wind, you can go very far. If you have consistency and predictability from government, you can also go very far also. And the NDCs are a perfect way to do that, as well as all the policies that underlie the NDCs.
Very good point. And picking something up that Fiona, I think you said before, you mentioned right now, Felipe, the consistency in policy that helps businesses to plan better, and vice versa. I think you expressed it as giving the backing for ambitious policy. So I'm curious, maybe Christina, hearing from your side, do you have either an example or an idea as to what this could look like for IKEA? Meaning, like, we talk about Brazil, for example, a lot in our cases, in our work together. What would be such a case where you see a bottleneck right now in terms of policy, so the absence of policy, and or an area where IKEA would love to do more in? Like you mentioned agriculture, for example. I can imagine for IKEA, it could be similar, but it might be also another sector. So do you have an example to make it a bit more tangible as to what could be a policy ask or a current policy bottleneck that you see?
I think it's both about the policy setting as such, then it's also about actually enforcing that is also followed. That's very important because we have our requirements on how we see responsible procurement and sourcing that needs to be able for us to actually implement in any country we are. And when it comes then to Brazil and also Vietnam, that now is within this project, we are having today already sourcing footprint there. We would like to grow. We are the same as Unilever. We're also looking into the region agriculture, both for crops such as cotton, and could also be soy and so forth for whatever part of our food offer and so. So we need to be sure that whatever we also buying, there is actually also fulfillment of what is being said in those legislations and what we want to push for. Another part where we in general, maybe not specific about Brazil, but it is we have put a goal for ourselves to have in any kind of wooden-based material products we do, minimum 30% recycled wood. Today we have very difficult to get our hands on that wood because it's not defined in the right way and it goes to less value-adding activities such as burning it for heat. And we see that there is a staircase of how you should use material. And here is where governments need to also see that so we can actually have more recycled feedstock, for instance, in our products. So we can put those goals as much as we want, but if we cannot find the material because it's not defined like that, it goes elsewhere. It's actually also a misuse of resources.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking what you said also before here, Fiona, we are future-proofing our business in a way. So this is where we can do so much also ourselves, but it is also for the countries to be on that journey. So together we can get where we need to be. And I think it's very important when we now talk about this project, we are in no way trying to finger point towards governments. I think we are there as collaborators. We wanted to put forward, we can do this. If you can do your part, we can together get to even further than anyone can do alone. So I think that's important and try to find the benefits of what we learn in this project and scale it fast. And it's also what you said, Fiona, we need to be sector specific and country specific, and also what do we do and want to do in those countries. And that can also change depending on the prerequisite the country is putting.
Yeah, no, very good. So that's exactly also how we, of course, design our project to have very specific country and sector asks of those governments, of those regions, right? Do you have another example from Unilever? Because I know that you already are actively engaged in certain projects. You mentioned sometimes you just stumble upon, oh, it actually has benefit for a certain country as well. Would you like to pick like one example from Unilever's work where you see this is how actually those align, like the national and corporate transition plans?
Sure. I should say there's a lot of planning that goes into all of our projects. There's never any stumbling upon anything. I do have to say that. I'll give you an example. For example, we've got very, very high renewable energy targets, and we know that we need to up this. And so how do you up it? And so, for example, in India, we say, well, we've got a lot of suppliers, we've got a lot of people in our supply chain. How can we use that for good in order to scale up renewable energy? And so we have gathered together 32 sites across 15 states in India to come together for a power purchase agreement. Now, that's quite a significant amount of people to come together and different sites to come together on this, because the government needs to know that governments need to know that corporates are backing them. They need to know that the demand is there. And why do we do that? We do that because it's good for the planet, but also it's good for business. There's going to be 25% saving on electricity costs, which is quite significant for a company. So we do a lot of things like that. Also, that was one of the opportunities where we could do something. We wanted to do it, but there are other areas where we want to have more attention from governments as well. So, for example, on fossil-free feedstocks, we want to make sure that the ingredients in our detergents, for example, are fossil-free. But that's an area that we're working on. It can only be unlocked if we work with governments on it. And I think it's really, really important to say this is about collaboration. This is about working together, not about finger pointing. Everybody can and must do better. And as we're saying, the time is quite urgent, and the time is certainly now that we need to act. So there's just some of the examples.
Very, very good. Interesting. Thank you. In your work, Felipe, have you come across both maybe positive but also negative examples of how it can work very well and what are bottlenecks, or how do these projects also fail sometimes? Because we can, of course, also learn a lot from those. Do you have any examples of like public-private sector partnerships that you would like to bring up?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start maybe with the bottlenecks. So one of our company members actually has a very nice mantra that says, no power, no projects. So they're very interested in looking around the world of where they can set up new facilities. And if the government isn't there to say, this is the access to power that you have, this is where the renewable energy is going to come, this is the grid connectivity that you're going to have, it doesn't make business sense for them to start a facility in that place. So I think that highlights where you have to work with government to be able to have those conversations and make sure those projects are realized. And the other, I would say, is a little bit more broad, and it's more about how international climate diplomacy works with some of these countries. So in a lot of cases, let's say to likes of Brazil or India, there's very much some comparative advantages that those countries have when it comes to the transition. So access to hydrogen or renewable electricity, etc. And they want to be seen as partners. I mean, speaking to Fiona's point, they want to be seen as collaborators. They don't want to be seen as this sort of paternalistic donor mentality of global north helping the global south. They have comparative advantages and they want to come to the table as equal partners. So maybe that's another point to add.
Yeah, very good. I think those points around, really, those are partnerships. Those are not just the sticks of like, we're gonna not invest if you don't give us ABC, nor is it we know it best. It's also how we phrase it in our project. These are proposals. This is like based on what we know, and here's the helping hand, so to speak. So speaking in terms of outcomes, we are here setting out what I would label as the eve of COP30. So Climate Week is just a few weeks away from the COP30 in Belém, where the 7th letter of the president also highlighted or invited businesses to come and to participate, the importance of businesses there. In this moment, what kind of outcomes would you like to see, both from the COP dialogues, but also then specifically from our project? Maybe we just start here and then just go kind of like one by one. What kind of outcomes would you like to see being driven from and by this project and COP?
I think just to show that business are committed to seeing climate action continue, and to show that we are backing that up with real plans and real investments. I think that's very, very important. And Unilever is very clear that we work on these issues because they're very important for our business and they're very important for our business case. And I think that is important to show. And I think we've seen that from Climate Week, actually. All the conversations I've been having have been about renewable energy, about regenerative agriculture, about how we can make our products more effective and more efficient. How can we work together on suppliers to make sure that they are feeling involved and making sure that we're working on our scope 3 as well as our scope 1 and scope 2. So for COP, I think it's really important that the business role is to show up, show what we're doing, and demonstrate the backing of that in order to give the people who have a very difficult job, the negotiators, the confidence and cover to know that actually there is investment, there are real plans backing that up, which is why, again, I think it's really important that people can show how their climate transition plans are being put into action and how they can reinforce national climate plans as well. I think that's the role of business at COP.
Very good. No, definitely don't want to change places with the negotiators. I know that they have a very, very tough job and it's lengthy debates, but backing them with the business voices, I think that's super important. Felipe.
Maybe I would speak to my fellow international initiatives out there. So there are so many, right? So the COP presidency has tried to organize them. There's about 600 that they're trying to work with under their climate agenda. And maybe it's just to say to those initiatives, give up the limelight a little bit and focus on results, right? It's for those that can and where it's appropriate, bring in business voices. We can't just keep talking among our initiatives. We need to actually see real change happening, and we can't do that without business. That would be my message.
And that's again like real change. Christina, what is your expectation?
I would like to just say copy everything that you said, Fiona. So I will not need to repeat on that. So I think that if I just say the essence of it has, as we see it in IKEA, it's all about leadership. I mean, we show that we want to continue leading this space. We are not giving up. We are committed. And that this can also be of good use for the country negotiators, say that business is there. So I would like to end almost with what we say in IKEA, we have a culture commitment and it kind of goes with everything. So what are we here to do together? It is first to work together. It's to lead by example. We can put examples on the table. It is to find the better ways. It can be innovation or can be implementation of what we already know works. And it is then the last point, to get things done, because time is ticking, 2030 is around the corner. All of us working on our product portfolios, if I say product for IKEA, like the chairs we're sitting on here, we are just a few cycles from 2030. Yeah. So we need to build in all the prerequisites in whatever is our line of business, what's going to meet the customer at that time, because that's when we need to have halved our emissions. We are on for a lot of work, but I think together we can do it.
Wonderful. I think those are brilliant words to close this session. I don't want to ruin this very nice closing statement. Leadership, partnership, we have the solutions, we have to scale solutions, we have to support each other. We're all, I mean, it's a global team sports. No one is in this here alone. No one can do this alone. And I want to thank you all for joining us here today in the matter of, or in the spirit of a team sports. Very excited for this project together and across the ecosystem, and looking forward to see what we can achieve together. Thank you again all, and have a wonderful rest of your Climate Week. Thank you.
It will be a dialogue. So look at me,
Between
look at
us.
each other. Yeah, thank you. Every organization committed to reaching net zero must inevitably set a carbon removal strategy for counterbalancing residual emissions. This is essential for meeting their climate targets. My name is Nick Nuttall. I'm going to moderate this session presented to you by the Exponential Roadmap and friends and Rethinking Removals. It's the launch of their Carbon Removals Action Guide for companies. And in this session, we'll hear about how the guide has been developed, and we'll delve into how carbon removals can be integrated into a company's climate strategy. So we're going to go straight into a panel and a discussion. And the panelists we have are Johan Falk. He's the CEO and co-founder of the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you.
Gabriella Walker, co-founder at Rethinking Removals. And Stefan Buski, Senior Manager, CCS, that's Carbon Capture and Storage, for those in the know, and Removals as well at the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. Okay, great to meet you all. So Johan, let's go straight to you. Why did the Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Rethinking Removals decide to produce this guide, and what's been the process leading up to this launch?
Thank you, Nick. So science is very clear. We need to halve emissions every decade, but we are still about 5 years behind what is required. But the good sign is that we actually see a tremendous development in terms of climate solutions, and we might be close to bending the curve. But it's not sufficient just to focus on mitigation. At the same time, we need to scale up carbon removals exponentially while protecting nature. And we can't wait to net zero. We should actually start from today. And from our perspective, what we saw as absolutely essential is basically to mobilize the companies to start to invest today. And that is why we developed this guideline together with Rethink Removals, Oxford Net Zero, Race to Zero, WBCST, and we have a number of great partners like VSR, Iceberg Max, Nordic Climate Advisory Group, Women Business Coalition. And a key point is that we can't just wait for the standards. We need to start today. We need straightforward, high integrity guidance where companies can get started immediately. So that is the purpose why we kicked off this
Right.
particular project.
Good. Gabriel, let's come to you. So Johan just said we have mitigation, but we need to go further. We need to have removals. So what are carbon removals so that the average person just gets it, right?
Okay, so what I must say is I'm immensely proud of this moment because I had exactly that conversation with Johan about 2 years ago, sitting on the top of a mountain in Norway in the rain, where with a piece of rock in our hands, drawing out on the soil of the mountain exactly what an exponential scale up of carbon removals needed to look like, what they were, and how they needed to go alongside reduction.
Do you have a photo of this?
We actually do have a photograph of it.
Oh, it's a shame we don't have it on the show
can't show
right
it,
now.
but it was a legendary moment because that's where we realized that with exponential roadmap initiatives, work with companies to say this is how you should do your net zero, that there was a missing piece, which is carbon removals. And so what are removals? It's basically taking the carbon dioxide back out of the atmosphere and keeping it out. The way that you tell if something was a removal is, did it start in the air? And is it not in the air anymore? And are you keeping it out for a substantial amount of time? So carbon removals can span a very wide range of methods from trees. Trees are very excellent carbon capture devices. It still blows my mind that trees make their entire bodies out of thin air and they're great at capturing it. You can also do it in soils. You can store carbon in rocks. You can store it in the ocean. You can grind up rocks and spread them on fields and turn them into carbon sponges. You can suck air through devices that capture the CO2 and you can bury it in geological storage. You can make energy out of wood and capture. There's an entire range, and all of those have been coming into play really strongly in the last 5 years or so.
Okay. And why is it so important to get companies to actually sort of start doing this, investing in carbon removals?
Yeah. Johan said that one of the reasons we wanted to do this guide is that we needed to start now. We needed companies to start now. And here's why. There's all these inventive ways to do carbon removals. However, those projects need financing in order to scale. And the only way that they can get financing is they have to have proof of a future market. And that's where the companies come in. There's all these different ways that the companies can show, yes, we're engaging in this. One way is an offtake. I promise to buy in the future, and that's a proof of future market. Another way is doing removals in your own operations or in your own value chain. But all these ways are showing that the market is there so that the projects can get the financing so that they can grow at the pace that we need. If we wait and say, I'll buy it when I need it, it won't be there.
Okay. Good. Let's go to Stephen. It is Stephen. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Good. My name is Nicholas, but I'm always known as Nick. So I'm always a bit careful with Stephen or Steve, but that's good. It's Stephen. Okay. So I'm coming round to you on this. Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Rethinking Removals have now launched this guide. And how has the World Business Council on Sustainable Development been involved, and why did you get involved?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having me.
Okay.
It's great to be here. So for context, WBCSD is a not-for-profit based in Switzerland. It focuses on mainly three things, so climate, nature, and equity. And what we have is a vision by 2050 of 9+ billion people living well within planetary boundaries. And we have a membership base of 250 multinational organizations. They represent 26% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 24% of global revenues. So big businesses. And if we imagine that they do a fantastic job in decarbonization, there's still 1.5 gigatons per year by 2050 that these member companies will need to neutralize through carbon dioxide removals. Now, we would work with organizations like Exponential Roadmap Initiative to be additive. There's no point when you have a great group of people already working on guidance for companies to do this again. So our role in this was as a reviewer. And if you look through this, in the credits, essentially, it's a stellar team of experts who have been part of this guide. So if you were to build a high-performing sports team in carbon removals, I say that we have this in this guidance. So
you're going to win the Olympics, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. Or the Commonwealth Games, who knows?
Indeed.
Okay, very interesting indeed. Let's turn back to Gabriella to hear about the contents of the guide. Okay, can you illuminate, in the sense, the key steps outlined in this guidebook, and maybe if you've seen examples of companies following the steps already?
Sure. So one thing I should say is that I'm here with my rethinking removals hat on, but we have a sister organization called Curate, which I also co-founded, which is a commercial organization alongside the nonprofit. And I mentioned that because a lot of the insights that we brought into the guide have come from real practical experience. Curate works with many different companies to help them in their removals plan. And so I spent a lot of my time in the rooms with the people who are struggling with these issues. And I think the same with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. This guide has been created out of real issues raised by real companies. And as Stephen said, then went through a very substantial round of review and testing, so that we think this is very practical, it's very pragmatic, it's not prescriptive. We're not saying do these very, very precise things. It's a guidance for how you ought to go about this. So that was with that proviso. There's basically six key steps, and we give quite a lot of guidance within the guide about how to go about them. So step one is integrating removals into your strategy. I talked about this a little bit before. It might be looking for removals and how they can fit into your value chain. It might be that you do them in your operations, or it might be that you look to purchase high integrity credits. But those are the ways in which you want to do that. And you also, in the first step, need to secure your board and finance team's buy-in. It's not enough to have this just in the sustainability division. It has to have internal buy-in. We've learned that over and over again. And the next one is that you calculate, or at least you estimate your residual emissions, the emissions that you know that you're really unlikely to be able to reduce, so that you know what the size of the removal target is that you're going to need to have to get to. And then when you've done that, you also need to plan the structure of how you get from here to there. So what you're going to need by when in order to build up to that level of residual emissions. So that's setting a removals trajectory. So what have you done? You've integrated it in your strategy and you've got the internal buy-in. You've then calculated your residual emissions. You now have a trajectory. So the next thing to do is to make a removals portfolio. And in that, we are very emphatic, and this is something that both at Rethinking Removals and Curate, we constantly emphasize. You need a portfolio. You need to spread the costs, you need to spread the risks. Some of these approaches have a very high technology readiness level, but might have different kinds of risks associated with them in terms of risk of reversal. The CO2 might come out again too soon. Others might have a brilliant way of measuring, but they're not quite ready yet. So you need a portfolio, and we recommend that you have at least some credits that have a durability of less than 100 years, some in the 100-year and plus category, and some in the 1,000-year plus. And that way, you're spreading your bets, but you're also spreading the influence that you have on helping to build this industry. So once you've done that, you also need to make sure those credits have high quality. And we recommend which are the groups that are working best on this to ensure you're doing it right, notably the ICVCM and Oxford Net Zero. Then, how do you pay for it? So the next step, you've got your portfolio, you figure that out, how do you pay for it? So there are different funding models and different companies already doing this. So you might have an internal carbon price, and you use that to fund it. So that might be one way. You might have fixed budget where you allocate a budget to this. You might be passing it on to your customers in some way. You might be doing all three of those. And if you are doing all three, that's probably one of the most robust ways to go. And finally, once you've got the money, the next thing to do is the accounting. And our recommendation here is separate out what you're doing in reductions and what you're doing in removals, and be completely transparent. As in many things in the climate space, transparency is our friend. If you're transparent about what you're doing, it future-proofs anything you're doing in this space, and it really helps you understand where you are in the process. There you are. And actually, may I just say, there's one more thing I wanted to say, because there's a question about why companies would even do this in the first place. And there's so many that are already acting on this. It used to be just the kind of the tech companies, the Microsofts, but it's now moving into more or less every sector. And they're doing it because they can get access to credits, they can get access to removals, they get better pricing, they can be climate leaders, and they know that they're building the capacity that they're going to need in the future.
And a couple of companies, for example, who are using this strategy?
So there's parts of this strategy that are being used by so many different companies, and we have supporters for this in IKEA, in Apple. But if I were to give a list of the companies that are already engaging with airlines, British Airways is doing parts of this and has been leading the way in airlines. Heineken is doing this, Coca-Cola Hellenic, a whole suite of companies that I could name that are already engaging in different parts.
Right, and so people can learn from them as well how it's going. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, let's go to back to Stephen on this one. Yeah, Exponential Roadmap Initiative and Rethinking Removals have now launched this guide. Have you been involved? Why did you get involved? I think we've covered that. No, we haven't covered that.
What are other
Tell us a
companies
little
thinking
bit
about
more.
this?
Yeah, what are the companies thinking about it? Yeah, I'm just getting it to here. Yeah.
Thank
Super.
you. Yeah, so I've had a lot of conversations this week about carbon dioxide removals. I would say it's becoming more vital for companies to truly show credibility. They've set a plan. The best analogy I've heard is someone said, "Oh, I'm going to run a sub 3-hour marathon," and everyone says, "Oh, that's fantastic. So how's your training going?" And carbon dioxide removals is kind of the same. So you set a net zero plan, but if you don't have readiness for that next stage of truly meeting your net zero commitments, you're essentially setting yourself up to fail. So that's one takeaway that I've heard. And then I would say ultimately there's urgency, but also uncertainty. So companies want to act, but they do still face barriers. Leadership buy-in is a key one. So really, what is that business case? Why spend money today when there may be other decarbonization options that they could apply that capital for? And also navigating the evolving standards. So I work for WBCSD. We co-created the greenhouse gas protocol. I know there's a lot of attention on that. So some companies are essentially waiting until there's clarity on the outcomes of these standard updates. But then I'd say there's positivity too. There's some companies who realize that these updates are going to take years, and they recognize the urgency. So they're acting in any case, which I think is also fantastic. I would say another key thing I've heard this week is the power of collective action. So these companies typically recognize that despite their best efforts, even the largest company, if they achieve net zero, it's great for them, but it doesn't have climatic relevance. So they need to be essentially growing a market where others come in on this. So that's been a theme I've heard from companies that aren't just in the tech sector, but hard to abate and others. They're really seeing that if they work together, small investments today can grow into significant savings in the future as this market grows. So yeah, I would say ultimately internal alignment is a big one, and then the power of collective action, I think, is a key thing that's coming out right now.
And your members, I mean, members within the World Business Council on Sustainable Development who are actually already operating in this field, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So our cohort has some of the biggest procurers on the planet, which is fantastic. And, they've all done it for slightly different reasons, I would say. And their strategies are also different. And what we are able to do is share that with others. So we ran a series of workshops where we are demonstrating what's worked within the boardroom, essentially the why, what, and how of carbon dioxide removals from leading industries, and then sharing that among peers to help, tell that story to their own boards.
So I imagine that there are some areas that are of removals that are currently a little bit more popular than others, or others are kind of more coming along. I mean, direct air capture is expensive, right? But tree planting, if it's done properly, of course, can be less expensive, but very impactful. Are there certain forms of removals that are more attractive right now than others, or others that need more effort, like CCS or something like that?
So I'll say just quickly, we're a strong advocate for a portfolio approach. You'll see this in this guide as well. So this is using nature-based solutions and tech-based solutions. And they provide complementary benefits. So you can get climate impact today while providing catalytic capital to scale future solutions, which ultimately we need on gigaton scales. We're talking about roughly 10 gigatons per year by 2050 of CDR. There are sustainable scaling limits to any of these solutions. There's no one silver bullet that's going to allow this to happen. So we need as much nature as we can. We need as much direct air capture as we can in the right places. We need biochar, enhanced rock weathering. And I would say companies typically look into their value chains and see where there's strategic levers. So I wouldn't say that one company has a particular favorite, but sometimes they might see alignment to a specific methodology that kind of has a better feel for them. So
Right.
that's one reason sometimes they might dip their toe in that space first,
Right.
but still looking at a portfolio.
Gabriella?
Well, one thing I've really noticed in our work with the companies is that there's an increasing interest in tying carbon removals into the operations, not necessarily directly doing the removals, but tying the narrative around them into the operation. So making it make sense. There's an example of an insurance company, for example, who wanted to purchase biochar. So biochar is this wonderful stuff where you take offcuts from wood or shells from nuts or husks from rice, any kind of biomass, and you burn it in the absence of oxygen, and that locks up the carbon and turns it into something that looks a little bit like charcoal, hence biochar. And then that can be spread onto fields, and it improves the quality of the soil. It almost acts as a fertilizer. It also locks up the carbon. It was actually invented by Native Americans in the Amazon rainforest, not to solve the climate problem, but to improve the quality of the soil. So this particular insurance company wanted biochar that the origin of the biomass was bamboo. And the reason was that bamboo in this place was an invasive species that was increasing the risk of flooding. And the insurance company insures against the risk of flooding.
Right.
Equally, the biochar, when it goes on the field, makes the crops more resilient. And they insure against loss of crops. So this is a way that I think, and we mentioned this in the guide as well, when thinking about how to put the portfolio together, it's a portfolio of removals that makes sense for your business, that's relevant to your value chain, that fits in with what you're trying to achieve. So you start to build something that's much more of a business case instead of just philanthropy for it.
Johan?
Yeah, and we need a massive scaling of nature-based carbon removals, but also technical solutions. I think it's a key not to put them against each other, because we need to scale all solutions. And it's also the reason why we, in the guide, we haven't prescribed in detail. We give guidance, but say that the precise how you build your portfolio, that's something that should develop as a company, and that we don't go down in detail precisely on prescribing A or B or C. We think that is essential. And also, of course, the level of investment. I mean, if you are a consultancy company, you could potentially even invest and counterbalance 100% or even more. We have some companies doing that of your unmitigated emissions, so that's possible. Whereas if you're another type of company, you might need to take an approach where you're starting with a couple of percent of the unmitigated emissions. So that's also essential to take into consideration.
I think that the point there is that we talked a lot about this when we were writing and building the guide, that we wanted to make sure that it was helpful and specific, but that it wouldn't be so prescriptive. I think with many of the standards that are being developed, the challenge is that they become so prescriptive, they're very difficult to operationalize, and they take a long time to come into effect. So we wanted to put power into the hands of the companies to allow them to do what they're best at, which is understand what's needed, understand the range and the guidelines, if you like, but also the borders, the requirements for integrity, the need for building the industry, and then armed with all of that, then act in a way that makes most sense for their businesses. And we think that's the best way to get this action to grow.
Do you think, I mean, sorry, it's a little bit off script here, but I mean, you talk about the greenhouse gas protocol, that's kind of widely accepted by governments as well, etc. Do you think something like this guide could evolve, not in a restrictive way, of, like a totally prescriptive thing, but get some kind of welcome support from governments, maybe even at COP30 in Belém? Are you working on those ideas? Or?
So we're working at Rethinking Removals. We work very closely with rule setters across the removal space. And our role has been just to ensure that removals are thought about in the mix, but not as something separate and over there in a corner, but properly integrated as part of an overall climate plan. We've learned over the years that anything where you say it's this versus that usually fails. It has to be a properly integrated overall plan with reductions alongside removals. And so we do a lot of work with the Science Based Targets Initiative. We're working very closely with the International Standards Organization that's building a standard for net zero aligned organizations, and we've been really helping them to bring removals into there. We work with the Oxford Net Zero, of course, who've collaborated with us on this guide, who brought out the Oxford offsetting principles. We work with the Race to Zero, the Climate Champions from the UN. And for all of those, we're helping make sure that removals fit in with the rest of the climate plan. But we're starting to see what I like to call kind of pre-compliance signals from the future about what governments are going to require about removals. And one of the things that we're trying to achieve with this guide and with our work is to try to make sure they all rhyme. We hear from companies again and again that if we have conflicting rules and it becomes confusing, we're just going to wait. And the one thing we can't afford is to wait. The best time to start working on carbon removals and engaging in it was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So at COP30 in Belém, we'll have the first CDR pavilion, which is, I think, a massive step.
Right.
Be worth recognizing that. And yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yep, you'll have the first CDR pavilion. So you'll be inviting governments and private sector and others in to discuss this, and perhaps a guide as well, and how it can go forward. Yeah,
the way that the COPs, these big conferences of the parties that do all the negotiating about the global climate agreement, the way that they work is that they have pavilions where different organizations can engage, and each country usually has a pavilion, and then there's a nature pavilion, there's an oceans pavilion, but there's never been one on carbon removals. It hasn't been seen to be relevant enough. And this year, for the first time, we have. And I think that's really going to make it helpful. A fantastic group of people working on it. It's going to make it helpful to show how removals integrate into the rest.
Thank you. And I just remembered what I was going to say.
Oh, all right.
So it was.
I do that all the time. Don't worry about that.
Easily done. So context from the United Kingdom. Recently, they just released their greenhouse gas removal business models. So this is how the UK government sees greenhouse gas removals fitting into a larger growth mandate for the UK. And ultimately, they see it as a true enabler to meet the needs of growth in our country.
Right.
So it's scaling whole new industries, supporting just transition of clean jobs for decades to come. So I would say governments are getting much more serious about this, and Gabriel's already mentioned, but voluntary markets are not big enough for this. Ultimately, we do see it becoming a compliance driver. And there's already signals that that's starting to happen for greenhouse gas removals in many different jurisdictions.
May I just say, just quickly,
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to ask Johan about this, but so one of the things I've noticed, so I'm very proud of the UK government. It's also announced how it's going to integrate removals into the emissions trading scheme. Japan's already done that, but also governments across the global south are engaging in this. Kenya, Brazil is engaging in carbon removals very strongly in the run up to COP. Germany is making a purchase of carbon removals. You can see even the US has carbon removals still surviving in the policies that are here. So what's interesting here is we had to think very hard when we were writing the guide about how to make it future-proof. So this is voluntary, but we built into our description of what we think you should do a very keen understanding of the signals that are coming to us from the future about what the compliance is likely to look like to ensure that this approach really stands the test of time. Yes,
Johan?
Yeah, that's right. I think the idea is to look ahead on the standards and the principles, so to as far extent as possible, so that we wouldn't deviate from, well, for the company's perspective, that you can actually start here and then we can adapt the course. You shouldn't wait, of course, for the new standards in order to take action now, but we're as aligned as possible because we're part of the standardization work and with all our people.
Very interesting. Can I add one thing in? We've got more countries now putting down their national climate plans. There were many yesterday, even China with actually an emission reduction target, which was really fantastic to see. And many with all gases now in their new nationally determined contributions. So methane as well, and others. There's a lot of talk about methane. There's going to be a lot of talk about methane at COP30 because, of course, if we get rid of it very quickly, we might have the emergency brake right now, at least in the short term. Do removals include other gases like the chlorinated, fluorinated gases, which are still stockpiled all around the world and need to be destroyed? Does it include methane, or are we talking just CO2? Sorry. So, maybe a technical question, but I think it's quite important. actually.
Absolutely. So I'll provide some context. For instance, as I said, the UK government has called it greenhouse gas removals rather than carbon dioxide removals in their business business plan. And some of the leading companies think of it in the same way. So they are really looking about ways to have, credible, impactful impact today, and potent greenhouse gases are a key element of that. So super pollutants are certainly recognized as another way to, as you say, pull the handbrake.
Right.
WBCSD also partners with the Stanford Doerr School of Sustainability, and they have a greenhouse gas removal accelerator. So looking beyond carbon dioxide removals, methane destruction, novel technologies that are going from labs to scale up.
And just one comment. So you use the word super pollutant, and the reason these things are called super pollutants is that they have a much bigger punch when it comes to climate change than carbon dioxide itself. And so if you can remove them, then you have a much more immediate impact. They have a big punch, but they also have short lifetimes.
Yeah, methane's like 80 times CO2, and
but it has a very short lifetime. So but the one thing I'd say is that it's not actually a greenhouse gas removal, because typically it's stopping them being emitted into the atmosphere in the first place. So if you have these kind of old refrigerators or air conditioning units, you're stopping the trapped gas from going into the air rather than taking it out of the air. But we are actually looking at things like stacking up. So super pollutants to have an immediate impact now. Then shorter durability removals, like nature-based removals, to have an impact next. And then investing now in building the capacity for the longer term, longer duration storage for what comes after. And the important thing to emphasize about that is that this is a way to have impact on the climate now, in the next 10 years, and in the next 20 years. But for all three of those, you need to start committing now. It's not enough to wait.
Right. So we're really coming to the end of the session now. So Johan, I want to turn to you, because can you maybe wrap this up for us? Some final remarks on it. I mean, it seems quite exciting, and I didn't realize myself how much scale of action and thought and whatever is going on in this. So it's good news. So please.
I think we have a very important milestone. We developed the guidelines. It's gone in a lot of, as you said, a lot of intelligence and absolute best effort. Now the next step is we will get many more companies start implementing, as we can also create a lot of examples. Any company can of course download and start to work on implementing, following the guide. We will take back feedback, of course, in order to see where we need to tune the guidance over time and potentially complement it with other tools. But I think it's about creating a momentum among the leaders. Stay on course, but that the leading companies and organizations going in the front line and show it's possible, but also to build strong cases. Can we combine carbon removals with adaptation, resilience, and it's a good case for companies, and share that practices between the companies to make it into a strong business case will be very important. And that's very much about leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope that we'll be broadcasting live from Belém over roughly 2 weeks, and be nice to maybe have another go at this subject with some of the companies doing removals and some of the countries, for example, the UK, on where they see it going, and so on and so forth. So I think it's not a one-shot story, this.
It's certainly not. It's a living document.
It's a living
and
document.
we want a lot of input for how to use it.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed for being on We Don't Have Time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello and welcome again to this session from the Nest Climate Campus here at New York Climate Week 2025. Here we're going to look at and discuss the role of professional service providers as enablers of the transition to a net zero world and the challenges and opportunities that come along with that. Companies in the professional services sector, like technical and management consultancies, advertising, lobby firms, usually have a relatively small emissions in their supply chain. However, their biggest climate impact lies downstream. These are long words like downstream and upstream and things like that. I'm sure our guests are going to get it. So the climate impact lies downstream in the influence these firms have over the customers they work with and the projects that they choose. Therefore, it's crucial that these companies can align and rebalance their customer and project portfolio with a 1.5 degrees centigrade ambition to advance not just climate goals, but system transformation across industries. Okay, let's, yeah. Together with some of our key partners from this sector, we'll discuss the key challenges. The Exponential Roadmap Initiative is leading this and supported by We Don't Have Time. And we're going to also talk about opportunities for business and integrating climate into their strategies. And we'll also share the latest progress in aligning professional service providers' portfolios with net zero. So let's have a look at our panelists. You're the experts. You're going to explain all this. I'm just going to prompt you a little bit here and there to talk. So we have Sarah Lindstrand, Director of Sustainability at AFRY, which is an award-winning engineering consultancy firm. We have Anna Riot. Riot. Okay, good. I love mangling the Nordic. You know, the British are very good at this. We all think we own the language. Yeah? Riot. Yes. Nordic Chief Impact Officer at Ernst & Young and one of the largest professional services companies globally. And Camilla Hislop, researcher, with Oxford Net Zero. And that's the research initiative at the well-known Oxford University, or University of Oxford. And last but not least, Katarina Wangler-Bjork. Thank you. There's a very famous pop singer called Bjork, isn't it? That's not you, is it?
Yes, it's my biggest sister.
Okay. You're Chief Impact Officer at the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. And we know that's a collaborative climate initiative and an accredited partner of the UN Race to Zero campaign. Okay. So we have 30 minutes. And let me ask you, Camilla, to maybe set the scene by explaining why does this matter and what is happening with the current landscape?
Thanks, Nick. Sure. So I was at a panel earlier this week and someone said that net zero is a team sport. So I think what we're thinking about here is what is the role on our team of professional services providers? And in the way that we currently think about it in our standards and our guidelines, it's a relatively small role. And that's because the way that kind of scopes 1, 2, and 3 work and the way that we've set it out, it means that the advice that professional services firms give isn't included, which means that really when they're thinking about what their impact is, it's just their operational emissions. These are important. I would have loved it when I was a baby lawyer if I could have printed less files in the name of decreasing emissions, but they're really small, right? So professional services firms in the UK where I'm based made up, I mean, the stat can be challenged, but about 10% of the UK GDP. And that's quite a big role. So we really want to use them on our team to get to net zero. And the way that we should think about doing that is what advice are they giving? Because the advice that they give either is going to increase or decrease emissions. And that's really what we're thinking about with service emissions is if you are taking credit for the advice that you give, and that credit could be that you're getting paid or it's on your website to kind of show how good you are, then you also need to take responsibility for those emissions. This is still relatively new. It's kind of following on from financed emissions that came in about 5 years ago. This has been in the works, certainly with Oxford Net Zero, for about 2 years. We released some principles last year in September, but it's still relatively new, but there are some people who are really have gotten on board, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of the panel about it.
Okay, all right. Katarina, can you tell us about the work that ERI is doing to advance this topic?
Yes, I can. So we launched a strategic tool last year at New York Climate Week together with AFRY and Oxford. And also we've been part of this Race to Zero group to just evolve on this topic and see what can be done. And what we looked at was how can we create a tool that embeds the actual business for professional services. How can they move the actual business model, if you will, to become a bit more 1.5 degrees aligned? So that was our ambition with the tool, and we developed a matrix, which is a matrix as you can see it. So on the y-axis, you have the client portfolio, where we would assess the different clients on if they're like professional services clients, so what professional services actually deliver in terms of value often. If they're aligned with, or if they even are a sort of climate solutions, really ambitious, or if they might be a fossil provider to be really on the bottom. And then on the other axis, x-axis, we rank the actual engagement, the project that is the core, the meat of professional services business. And also there, try to separate them in 4 criteria, just to see how aligned are them with 1.5, or on the opposite, might contribute to increased emissions. And why do we do that? Or why did we develop this? Because we see that there's huge influence in these firms on the large corporates, but also on finance sector. So to have a tool that could help the firms assess where they are and set strategic goals, where do we want to go? How can we become a climate leader? And also to do that, attract more clients that also want to be in that space. So yeah, that's where it all started.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So turning to our other guests, then, so let's hear about key challenges, but also opportunities in aligning PSP portfolios. It's a new acronym that we all have now. PSP portfolios with net zero. Sarah, could you briefly share AFRY's experience in advancing this transformation, and what has worked well and what has been challenging?
Yes, of course. And I must say, I'm really excited to be here, also with EY, kind of representing 2 different angles from the professional services sphere. So we're an engineering company, AFRY. So I'm backed by 18,000 engineers who are really providing engineering knowledge and design in the energy sector, in the industrial sector, and in the built environment. So it's a lot of things we can do to really support the green transition. And coming back to the topic becoming more alive now, that is true. I'm really happy it's being spoken about, because from our point of view, we've been promoting this for many years. We know that by far the biggest opportunity and potential we have on the sustainability transition is through the projects we provide. Our own value chain emissions are fairly low compared to an industrial company, for instance. So yeah, last year we started off by launching the professional services matrix together with the ERI. We had conducted a pilot on our own portfolio to really understand how is the distribution of the net sales from the projects that we conduct over a year. We conduct over 120,000 projects annually. We have 18,000 clients that we serve. So it's quite a big challenge to map out that in this amazing matrix that we love. It's very intuitive. It tells the story of where we are and where we want to go, but then actually measuring and populating that matrix, it is a challenge. So we started off with the top 100 clients. That was, manageable. What we're doing now is to really scale the methodology and refine it, so we're actually able to capture all of those projects and the many clients that we serve. I would say the main challenge relates to the diversity of the clients that we work with. It could be anything from large corporations to the public sector to your local condominium association where you live. So it's a very diverse range of different clients, and then applying these principles to them is challenging, because it's one thing looking at a big corporation. We have fairly advanced ways of viewing them, but then looking at a public entity, what does that look like? How do we know if they would be then 1.5 aligned or not? So that would be one of the challenges we're dealing with. And then more on the project axis, it's we have a lot of data to go with, but still aligning the methodology with something that is actually science-backed. So agreeing on what do we view as a climate solution? What do we view as an solution that might accelerate climate emissions instead? So that those are the challenges that we've been dealing with, but we're eager to have this done.
Are you literally, if somebody, let's imagine somebody comes to you, says, we want your advice to build a building here. And you go, okay, fine. Obviously, we can give lots of advice and it's going to look really nice and whatever. But we could also make it quite climate, friendly as well. And they go, oh, okay, well, what are you recommending, right? And so you can then make some recommendations about that. Or can you tap into the global solutions on buildings, or I don't know. But is it just like, is it encouraging them to adopt more climate friendly building codes and activities and kits and heating pumps, and I don't know what goes on when these conversations start happening, right?
Yeah, and I would say it depends on the market. Some clients are fairly advanced, so they know what they want. They know how to integrate the criteria in the bid phase already.
Right.
But then many clients would come to us because we have the knowledge on, this would be a feasible solution for this specific type of project. And we always aim at integrating those perspectives and actually implementing the solutions we know exist. And I think that's been an echo this whole week and last year. The solutions exist. We need to really make sure to massively scale and deploy them. And that's where we tap in to really have them as part of the project.
Let's come back on this in a moment because it's fascinating. And let me go now to Anna. It's a similar question. How is EI, Ernst & Young? It's EY now. You don't say Ernst & Young. Oh, in our hotel right now, we've got a sky picture of New York City from the air, on a big street, and you've got all the lights, it's night. And then you've got Ernst & Young written down in it. So that's, it's hard to escape it sometimes. It's like British Telecom, right? Most British people still go British Telecom, but it's BT these days, But okay, EI, not AI, but EI. How is AI addressing the emissions coming from the services you provide? And what has worked and what has been difficult? Yeah.
So first, I want to say, and I think all of us agree that we have as an advisor, an extremely important role.
Yeah.
And looking at EY, we have around 400,000 employees, and we work with many of the world's oil companies in all industries, cross service lines. And just looking at that, we give advice into tax and law, into assurance, into management consultant, regular advice, and to M&A, all industries. So I think the biggest impact we can do right now is to make sure not only that we give the right advice in all these areas when it comes to sustainability, but really, as you said before, like looking at all the other projects we're doing. How can we really apply an impact lens and looking at decarbonization, circular economy in everything we do? So I think that's one thing that we are now trying to implement to get that into each and every one of the projects. Another part is really talking about opportunity and challenges. One of the largest challenges I see from our clients right now is that the problems, the challenges they face are so complex, so they can't just solve them themselves. They need to work with the entire ecosystem. They need to break silos, work with the sector, work with other sectors within the industry, work with policy makers, influence politicians. And I think there, EY has a really, really important role to play because we can bring these stakeholders together to sit with one table and talk about how can we actually make a difference in the ecosystem, what is missing, who's not at the table, if we want to accelerate change. So I think for them, that's the biggest challenge. For us, of course, as an advisor, that's our biggest opportunity to be that provider or an architect of a new era that is focusing on decarbonization and circular new business models.
So I suppose, but you're more in the world of carrots than sticks, aren't you? I mean, in other words, you can't force them to do it, but
No.
you can encourage them, or that's why I say you're more in carrots than sticks, because carrots are sort of
Yeah, but I
attractive things
think
to.
the beauty of working in the impact space and with sustainability is that like 10, 15 years ago, everybody did a lot of pledges. There were a lot of big words.
Yeah.
Now, 15 years later, we can actually, and we have proof that it is business sense.
Yes.
That the climate smart is cost smart. That if you want to have a reliable supply chain, you need to think about circular economy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the risk of your business is brutal. So I think it's easier actually now to argue and give advice and look at the bottom line and the increased potential profit and revenue than it was before.
Okay, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So Katarina, so Exponential Roadmap Initiative is working to scale the integration of climate-aligned decision-making in this public sector. PSP, I need to go back and just read it again. What is PSP?
Professional services
provider.
providers,
It's
so
such a new
management
acronym for me.
consultants, advertising firms,
Absolutely.
legal firms,
Absolutely.
all
And
the
so
ones working with
you're
advice.
working to the integration of climate-aligned decision-making in this sector.
Yeah.
And can you share one highlight and maybe one pain point, one hard thing about this whole process?
Yeah, I mean, and highlight is very much in the influence of these firms that is enormous, and that and it's been a pleasure to work with you at AFRY and having conversations with others such as EY, because there's an ambition and that many firms already deliver on that. And there's so many brilliant people. So it's just so beautiful to be with these firms and with Oxford. So that is, I mean, that's highlights in the initiative that we do. There's a lot of ambition, there's so much competence, and when we bring it together, it grows, and the solution, we really co-create this solution because it's done while applied, and it's developed while applied. Going back to you, it's really difficult. It's been difficult manual work much, and now we look at how can we scale this and how can we get others on board? What do we need to do? And some things is to make sure that the criteria that we use, the lens that we use when we look at companies and projects is it's data-based, is science aligned as much as possible, but also feasible to do an assessment of. And that goes down to what data is available, how accurate is that data, how can we access it, and also how can we automate the processes. So that is, I mean, both the challenge and the beauty of it. Lots of competence, lots of data. We work with AI, of course, to enable this, to make it much easier to make a good enough customer journey for PSPs to join in.
So, I mean, we've got a little bit more time left, so let's just explore a little bit more here. So how does one then embed this in the ecosystem? How does one, I don't know, does one talk to science-based targets and say, could you help, kind of sensitize more of your members to this potential? How does one elevate it up from what is obviously, you're starting, it's an early thing, but it's really potentially very impactful in terms of climate action. And many of those companies that you work with, of course, probably have some kind of targets on climate change anyway. So they need the extra advice to actually elevate their, but how do you make it bigger, right? Yeah.
So we did recently a research that showed that companies that embed sustainability within their business strategy, within their DNA of the company, have a 40% more positive one-year outlook. So it's very clear that what we're trying to do is making sure that sustainability or decarbonization or circular economy is not a side project. It needs to be truly integrated into the business strategy. So how to elevate it? It's really trying to influence and impact the CEO of and the boards of a company to make sure they understand both how they can become more efficient, how they can future-proof their business, how they can tackle all this challenging while actually performing better. And for us, we have two different from the impact initiative that we are running. We focus on two different kind of companies. One is the companies that has as a business idea to solve some of the global challenges. And for them, it's just helping them scale because that's an issue and getting more capital into these kind of businesses. The other part are the companies that have very concrete targets and how to help their management and the company to actually achieve those target. What can we do more? So that's what we focus on right now very much.
Very interesting. I mean, yes, please.
I can just tap in on that also. On elevation, I think this is important. It's important to spread the message, to have other actors on board to also align on, could we agree on common principles on how to approach this? Because we all know it's important for us to not only have the integration, but to be able to map out the portfolio and know that we're moving in the right direction over time. So I think that's really key. So a call to action to other similar companies to also join in and let's sit around the table and define what we mean by this. But then on the, I would say, internal elevation, this has been a really good and intuitive tool for us to really showcase what we mean by, we're going to capitalize on the sustainability transition as a company. We want to be part of the solution and also, future-proof our business. So it's a really good and intuitive way to showcase that. So anchoring it internally, but then also integrating into, our strategy work, our risk work, because it's also about saying no to certain things. And most importantly, with the business. So, our business leaders know where are we moving and why are we doing it? And could we agree on what we view as, a 5-year roadmap on where this specific business unit should be, for instance. So it's both internally, but I would say the external part is maybe where we need more similar actors to also be part of the conversation.
But you're all connected often with large professional organizations, professional associations in your own countries or regions. I mean, there's the Green Building Council, for example. I mean, these organizations could be more involved in this strategy, right? By, I'm even thinking of what do you do with the small and medium-sized enterprises, right? Where they may have one accountant that looks after the books. How do they get to know that small business could be a little bit greened, right? With the right kind of choices and recommendations and advice, It's a big story, right? It's a massive, and that we haven't even touched on what happens in Africa and companies there and Asia, Pacific, Latin America. Is this really at the moment more a European phenomenon that you're using your skills as to advise your supply chains, or no, people that you advise anyway? It's more a European thing right now, or how do we bring it to the whole world?
I associate that question to what is going on. Are corporates pushing back? And what we see, no, they don't. Those who are ambitious, they keep steering the course. They invest even more in the ambitions of staying relevant for the net zero economy, which is, I think, a good advice to do. And with this specific discussion, yes, we hope to spread it outside of Europe and work with global firms. We have mainly European companies or firms in our hub where we collaborate with different angles, different verticals with Oxford Net Zero, and establishing a hub in a few weeks on this topic and how it looks in different verticals. So that is one part. How can we collaborate and spread that this is actually something worth doing, but also there's a strategic advantage in doing that, and also aligning on how we measure and how we might have comparability in our assessments and strategic goals.
Mhm.
So that is much what we are looking at, exponential roadmap.
Mm.
How can we come there? How can this be one of the coming standards in this work?
Mhm.
And what we do then is also not only inviting several professional services firms to our work, which I would love to do. Anyone wants to join in our
Mhm.
collaboration, please
Mhm.
come.
Mhm.
Sit around the table, develop this tool, but also to work with corporates and investors, because they're also have the same, I mean, both the same opportunity, but also are part of the value chain in this. So how do you procure as a corporate? What kind of services providers do you procure from? What are the requirements that you might want to ask
Mhm.
when you ask for service with AFRY, EY, or other firms? So that is something that we're working on.
Do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I agree that one thing we're really thinking about is how we can get clients to really push for this as well, because that will really help PSPs pick up on it.
Mhm.
The other way that we're thinking about it is how we can get this into standards. So right now we're obviously seeing kind of the creation of like a net zero standard, for example, and this has been done by the International Standard Organization, and then that really gets rolled out across the globe. So what we really need is to have one big happy standards family in which we include service emissions in that, and then that makes it much more applicable across the globe.
Yes, because at the moment service emissions are not included, right? So, but you have the banks are included, aren't they? When you talk about investors, banks, they have to take care of their supply chain a bit in terms of emissions. So yeah, okay. Of course, not wanting to over-regulate everybody, because then they go just suffocate in, you know, red tape and yeah, this kind of thing. Belém, Brazil, would EI be there with service providers and your?
We will absolutely be there.
Yeah.
We are a global firm, and we think for us and for our clients, the question around climate change, decarbonization it's absolutely critical. So we are going to be there. And also to your question before, I think since we are globally working on all different places, I think we shouldn't forget that there are progress everywhere, and that we need to be more open to see where are the best cases, where are the progress made, how can we copy that, how can we scale that, how can we learn from each other. Then having that said, I think Europe and particularly the Nordics have a huge opportunity now to take the leading hat or position when it comes to leadership and driving sustainability, decarbonization, and being more competitive. And yeah, that's what I feel right now. And also when I'm here, that a lot of Nordic companies are actually stepping up and double up on their sustainability efforts.
Yeah.
Yes, and I can just echo that. We will also be there with our partners and our clients, and to really promote what you were just saying. In the Nordics, we have the innovations, we have the solutions, and to really, you know, make that a success story and an export opportunity for our economy.
No, it'd be good though in Belém to actually, you know, see companies from Brazil and engaging with them on this, because I'm sure some know, but I'm sure a lot don't. And that would be really fascinating. Okay, we've come to the end of the show. We're right at the end. We're at past. Thank you very much for being with us. It was a very interesting new, new strategy with business, and nice to hear about it. And best of luck with your work. Yeah, that's it. And now, just before these good people go, we will switch in a moment to Monica Medina, a very important figure in American climate society in Conversations in Cars, which was made last year at New York Climate Week. So watch out for that in a couple of seconds. Thank you.
Thank you.
What I'm gonna do if I really want to, but you know, baby, break my mind empty. But you have the key, so open my heart, please, my heart, please. Tell me that I'm beautiful, till down to blush. Well, what you got.
Monica, it's so cool to be here during Climate Week New York.
Great. It's so exciting. I have never done anything like this before.
Honestly, me neither. And I'm a big fan of karaoke, car karaoke.
James Corden.
Yes.
I think I watched them all.
So maybe we should try and imitate that a little bit.
Can you sing?
No, can you sing?
Only in the shower.
Monica, this is so cool. We're in the back of this BMW.
Sweet ride.
Yeah, sweet ride. I think let's get rolling. But it looks like we're about to roll right into some traffic.
Into some traffic. It's New York. We should expect this.
It's New York, and it's Climate Week New York, and it's the United Nations General Assembly. The fact that we're moving at all is impressive to me.
It is. It is. It is always a little bit chaotic here. And then just driving in this city, because I'm sure that the views in a car like this are great because there are people coming at you from every angle, whether it's pedestrians and just to be able to hear them. We were talking about how quiet this car is when we got in. To be able to hear them makes a huge difference because, you know, it's hard with so many things coming at you in the city to drive and be as aware of things as you need to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, great.
Well, I'm hoping that this might be maybe my next purchase, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we start talking about how much we love this ride, let's experience the ride a little bit. Let's chat. I would love for those tuning in to learn a little bit more about you because you to me are now my friend Monica, my colleague Monica, but to everyone else, you are the Monica Medina.
Oh, that's too nice. No.
You have had an incredible career in public service. Let's start at the beginning. What brought you into, what inspired the career trajectory that you've been on? Where do you still plan to go? But let's start with what inspired you to begin in the first place.
Well, it gets back to my kids. I'm a lawyer by training, and I have spent a lot of my career in government, but I've spent a lot of it out of government too. I've kind of done a little bit of everything, which has been an interesting ride. It has not been a straight and narrow path. It's a winding road. But it started because my daughter, who's now about to have a baby herself. So I'm about to be a grandmother and thinking about, well, can you fit a car seat in the back? And you can. My daughter had asthma and I lived in the city and I was really struck by how many other kids were sort of popping up with asthma. She also has terrible nut allergies and there weren't many kids with that at the time, but now it's the kind of thing that people experience a lot more. It made me wonder why. What is it about our environment? What could it be that's triggering this? It's not just a genetic thing or a family trait. She had serious asthma and we had to do breathing treatments 3 times a day, and there were times where I worried that she wouldn't be able to catch her breath, and it made me think about what could I do. So I started to work on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee staff, and I did Clean Air Act work, and it was right after the Clean Air Act amendments in 1990 had passed. And so we were trying to make sure that the law got fully implemented. It was also the early years of the Clinton administration. And so as a Democratic administration, we were really interested in making this law as effective as possible. And we had great partners on the Republican side, a senator named Chafee, who had helped pass the law, and his staff were very involved, and we did a lot of oversight. And it was fascinating to learn how many other families and how many other kids struggled to breathe. And that's where my journey started. And it took me all kinds of places. I've done work both domestically and internationally now. I ended my last job in the government was in the Biden administration as the Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans, Environment, and Science. And that gave me an opportunity to work with Special Presidential Envoy Kerry, Secretary Kerry. I like to say I sang backup for him because wherever he couldn't go, they would send me. And he had a lot of requests, so
I'll
he was
back up for you in
no,
this
no,
part
I'm gonna
when it comes to it.
But I also did a lot of work on ocean conservation, on global plastic pollution, on marine and biodiversity in general. There's another conference of the parties that's all about biodiversity and conserving biodiversity, which is also under tremendous threat. So anyway, I had a wonderful opportunity to work internationally and to see how the things that we do in America, like all of our greenhouse gas pollution, really impacts the rest of the world. And when we passed the big climate bills, the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I could see that other countries finally saw us, the second largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, saw us as really doing our part to make the world a better place.
Right, like actually walk the talk.
Yes.
And so that's what happened with the Biden administration while you were in it.
Yes.
And you have a special spot in your heart for conservation. So this started, I didn't know the family link to this and the health link to this. So thank you for sharing that. That's deeply personal. When I met you most recently, in your role in the Biden administration, conservation was really
Yes.
in your heart. So tell me a little bit about why that's so special to you.
Well, two things. I mean, I was lucky enough in the Biden administration to be the first special presidential envoy, or special envoy, sorry, I shouldn't say presidential. Only Secretary Kerry got to be a presidential envoy, but a special envoy at the State Department for nature, biodiversity, and water resources. So it was really a wonderful thing that our government did to say, hey, we care about not just climate change, but about this big challenge with biodiversity loss. And it gave me an opportunity to represent our country in a lot of meetings where countries are not greenhouse gas emitters. They take a lot of the stress from extreme weather events, and a lot of the climate harms happen to them, but they're biodiverse, rich countries. So they really care about also conserving what they consider to be their wealth, their biodiversity. Sure. So that was tremendous. And at home, I worked on, when I was in the Clinton administration, one of the most interesting and challenging but really satisfying things I worked on was something called the Headwaters Forest, which is these 1,000-year-old redwood trees in California that were about to be all cut down. And this very brave and really determined activist named Julia Butterfly climbed up into the top of one of these trees and would not come down until the government struck a deal with a industrialist who owned this grove, and he kept threatening to cut them all down until the government would exchange some of his debts to the government for the trees. So we kind of did a debt for nature sort of swap for the trees, and Julia Butterfly came down. And it was, and interestingly, this is the funniest thing of all, and I'll do a small promo for this.
No, please.
There's a new Broadway show that was actually inspired by this whole incident. It's called Redwood. Okay. Idina Menzel. It's opening in January. Now she can sing. Get her in the back of this car.
Right.
But anyway, it was a really inspiring thing to think about these 1,000-year-old trees, how long they had been there, how much biodiversity they hosted, how cathedral-like they are. You just can't be among them and not think, have to protect them. Right. And so it was really inspiring to work on that. I also worked on buying out a gold mine that was trying to get built next to Yellowstone National Park that could have threatened those resources. So all of a sudden I thought about, not just pollution, but also about the natural world and how inspiring it is for people, and then during the pandemic, it was just amazing to see how many people reconnected with nature when they had time, or when they had the space to look out their window at home and see the birds, or enjoy the blue sky because it was less air pollution. So
we're gonna be able to usher in that future if we get it right. If IRA is disseminated as intended, and if we electrify transportation, and here we are in this electric car driving around. So talk to us a little bit about where you see the success of IRA going, especially as it relates to transport.
Well, there's just so many opportunities, whether it's to electrify school buses or other kinds of public transport, or to promote more walking and other forms of transportation entirely, like electric bikes or scooters. I know that they're a little bit distracting when you're driving, but our roads are very crowded right now. And the more that we can take some of that pressure off, the better. And there was a study just recently that Americans are driving more than ever. And so we really need these kinds of cars that will improve our air quality, lower costs because we won't be paying for gasoline, and also, it's innovation. It's the way we're going to keep ourselves from having such a big footprint on the planet.
I love the idea of not having to go to a gas station, but then I also get nervous. It's that whole range anxiety thing. I get nervous that my car is not going to make it from point A to point B.
Yep.
But we're solving that, it seems like. That's not going to be an issue that lasts forever.
We are. One of the big things that the bill does is help build out that electrification network, that charging station network. And I think it just takes time. You know, most of these changes that we're trying to make, they're not like flipping a switch. They're more like turning a dial. So little by little, we're going to be able to make those changes happen. And people will get more accustomed to riding around in a car like this one and knowing when they need to stop. And it will be more convenient because it'll be at places like the grocery store or in your office parking lot. Or, you know, I think increasingly people will share cars more too. Right. So anyway, it's
we'll get used to it.
really
I mean, this is
interesting
behavioral
how
change, right?
changes will happen. You know all about
I
behavioral
love
change.
This is the part of the conversation that always gets me excited because we are more comfortable with what we know, what's familiar. And so oil and gas cars have been, so oil fueled cars have been the default. And so therefore it's what we are uncomfortable with thinking. We're just uncomfortable with change. But when these cars become more ubiquitous, we're going to forget that we're not going to believe that we ever were accepting of oil cars.
Right. Someday people will think of these as like horses and buggies, right?
Exactly. So that's a future I'm excited about.
Not these cars. I mean, the cars around us.
Okay, so we've been talking about pollution, we've been talking about transportation, we've been talking about nature. How does this fit into the kind of bigger climate conversation? It's all connected, obviously, but how do you think about as somebody who has who's been able to prioritize in the U.S. government where to send attention and time and resources? How do you think about prioritizing where you would make the most impact with climate?
Well, I think the interesting thing about this administration, I'm really fortunate to have served in it, is that they thought about taking a whole of government approach. Not only could they figure out how can the government lower its carbon footprint, its plastic footprint. They're doing all kinds of things to reduce the amount of plastic that the government uses and disposes of. So the government's thinking a lot more along the lines of how do we lower our carbon footprint, our waste footprint. But in addition, it's thinking about these policies when it comes to housing or when it comes to agriculture. We've only just scratched the surface of all that we can do, and some of the most innovative and interesting things that will happen with these new laws is that some of the way that we think about farming will change. Our food will be just as good, but we'll use less water to grow it, or we'll need fewer pesticides or fewer fertilizers because of the way they're changing soil practices. There's another COP this year. Most people think about the climate COP, but there's another COP this year that's on desertification and land degradation. And it is just as important. It really matters in a lot of places where droughts are really, people are suffering because they don't have enough food to eat. And so thinking about the 3 COPs this year, there's so much opportunity: ag, energy, transportation, and industrial processes. It's a massive year. Again, another one.
And these are global conversations, and the Biden administration, and while you were part of the Biden administration, was really picking America's role back up as the leader in accelerating the transition to clean energy across all sectors. And I imagine you're hopeful that this will continue.
Oh, I think that, you know, we are on the right path. We are on the road to the future, and we can't get off.
I love the puns. We've had so many puns.
I know.
Or rather, you have, and I get to pick up on them. That was great. We are on the road to the future.
We are on the road to the future, and we are going to keep going straight ahead. And I know that American ingenuity and our, and you know, cars like this give people hope. They make people see that there are things that we can do, both together and as individuals, to make this planet a more livable place for our kids and our grandkids.
Yes, new grandmother. Amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Monica.
Thanks
for
so
riding
much.
with me.
Thank you, Shota.
I'm glad
this was great.
We probably spared everyone listening right now by not singing.
I know. All right.
That was not a bad decision.
Off we go.
Off we go.
So hello again, and thank you for joining us here at the Nest Climate Campus, which is at the heart of New York Climate Week 2025. We've spoken to some fabulous and inspiring guests, and I hope you enjoyed the last few days. And we're going to have some great guests. It's kind of like our last live bit before we go to a pre-recorded to finish off the day. Let's remember at COP28, just 2 years ago, a global target was established to triple renewable energy capacity and double the rate of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. So to talk about this, I'm very pleased to have two guests with us representing the spirit of tripling up and doubling down. I think you're the spirit of tripling up and you're the spirit of doubling down. No, you're tripling up. He's doubling down. There we go. It's like the Christmas story, isn't it? You know, with by Dickens. Bruce Douglas, you're the CEO of the Global Renewable Alliance. You're the tripler. And that's Mike Umke, the Managing Director of the Energy Efficiency Movement, and you're the doubler. Okay, we've got it right now.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Let's start with you, Mike. What have been your personal highlights and key insights from this year's Climate Week?
Yeah, thanks a lot, also, for having me here. I think for me, there are basically three things. First of all, energy efficiency is also a business driver, especially also here in the US, even though the narrative might be a bit different. Secondly, I've had the pleasure to attend very interesting roundtables, also one hosted by the GRA, where we had the European Energy Minister, Don Jurgensen, part of it, and kind of, again, also how does the combination of the tripling up and doubling down drive energy security, energy affordability, and so on. And I think the third was for me really kind of the vibe and the willingness and the motivation of the people that we have been able to capture, and everybody is going in the right direction. So I think it was a very successful week and a lot of steps and bicycle kilometers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's almost as if nothing has happened in the United States. It's business as usual because Climate Change Week is just, in fact, there's more people here this year, I think, than there were last year. I mean, so let's talk about solidarity with climate action. It's unbelievable. Bruce, what about you? What are your impressions of this week?
Same impressions as you, Nick. I mean, it's been 1 year since I was last here in New York. A lot has happened, geopolitically, politically, but I think you're right that the message coming loud and clear to me this week is we're all in. We're still active on fighting climate change, you know, and I'd like to say what a great pleasure it is to be here with Mike. So the doubling and tripling combined is critical. So as IEA said, it's the most cost-effective way and fastest way to decarbonize in this crucial decade is to combine the two. So my two highlights very quickly. First of all, the vibe here, positivity, we're all in. I was at the announcements of the NDCs yesterday, heads of state saying, yeah, we're going to do this. And the second was we hosted the Global Renewable Summit, which Mike took part in Monday, Tuesday, where we had heads of state, heads of corporates, all saying the same thing. On the occasion of that, we launched this advert in the New York Times, which highlights the benefits of renewables, jobs, security, and growth. I think that sends the message that not only are they good for the climate, they're also good for business and good for communities.
Absolutely. And we, in fact, quoted the European Union Commissioner on the show. I think it was on Tuesday, picking up from your event on Monday. With her just, I mean, there was incredible precision. It was 41% cheaper than fossil fuels. I was a bit nervous about, you know, could it be 41.2? But anyway, it's over 40%.
Cheaper, cheaper. That's right.
And it's unbelievably
so 90% of renewable projects installed last year are now generating power cheaper than fossil fuel alternatives. I mean, that's a big statement from an economic point of view.
Exactly. No, I used to be the environment and science correspondent of the Times newspaper in London, and I was writing about solar and wind in those days, and it was like $50 a unit, the cost of electricity, right? And people go, it's just for specialized things, you know, maybe space shuttles and things like that. You know, it really is a remarkable story in the last 20 odd years, what's happened with renewables and energy efficiency as well. So let's not forget that. So can we look at nationally determined contributions? We had also, you were at the summit yesterday, and Mike, were you there too at the UN? If not, but we've heard about it. It was fantastic, right? China actually has an emission reduction target for the first time, which is marvelous, in its new national climate action plan. More countries coming forward. what does it mean for your two sectors, right? What is it all about? This is the crunch time, right? This is the crunch 5 years coming right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So quickly from the doubling down, it's first of all great that I would say nearly 100%. I mean, 90% plus have energy efficiency in it. So I think that's a fantastic way forward. However, there is also a downside that only half around do have also measurable targets in there. So that's our role and our mission as well from the energy efficiency movement. We continue to showcase best practices, insights, how to drive the change. And what we have seen connecting to the IEA conference, where we had also the pleasure to work together this year, the private sector is ready. So the outcome from the IEA conference was also then, beside the CEO commitment, was the Brussels Business Action Plan, which kind of more or less says like, yes, let's put energy efficiency at the top of the agenda. Energy efficiency first principle, obviously. Then it's a business case. Let's remember this. So that's something where obviously you can invest and you get something back. But also at the same time, long-term stable policies are required so that businesses can continue to invest. And job growth, job opportunities. As per the IEA today, around 10 million people work in the energy efficiency space, and the number is actually expected to increase by another 50%. So I think good direction, good momentum, but let's now show also in the actions.
Yeah, and Bruce, obviously renewables are going to be vitally important for these new, more high ambition national climate action plans, NDCs. How do we, I mean, for some people now, they just sit back and go, oh, renewables are just growing. I mean, we just leave it, right? I mean, it doesn't matter, it's just going to continue, right? We can all go play golf. No, it's not quite like that, is it? I mean, basically, there are some things that need to happen to go faster, right?
That's for sure. I mean, firstly, on the NDCs, I was in the summit yesterday. It sends a powerful signal that almost 100 heads of state were there announcing their NDCs. Multilateralism is not dead. Paris is working. That's a great signal. Now, for us, it's not 9 out of 10, it's about 7 out of 10. So of the NDCs we've seen, about 78% of them have renewable energy targets inside. Not ambitious enough, but it's a great statement that renewables will play a role in that transition. And you're right, that's not what we say is targets are not turbines, promises are not panels. So you've got to actually build it. And to build it, you need policies, long-term energy planning. That's the secret. For us, that gives us investor confidence and certainty for deploying capital. And with that, then you have clarity on where, when, how much, and that gives us the incentive to build. And I think that's the trick. So we've got 11,000 gigawatts by 2030 is the ambition. It's an enormous target, and we're getting close to that annual delivery now. So we're breaking records every year and getting closer and closer to it. And as I said earlier, because of economics, governments and companies are now seeing that reality.
And storage, can I ask you about storage?
Yeah.
That really has to be ramped up now, doesn't it? Because there's so much renewables coming through. We need to start storing a lot more, yeah?
Absolutely. So you cannot triple renewable energy globally without storage of all durations. So short duration batteries up to 8 hours, but also importantly, long duration storage as well. So pumped hydro, for example, is a great solution to capture and store the green electrons. It's storage, but also grids. So we move the green electrons in location with grids, but also in time with the storage, the times when it's needed.
Okay.
And then obviously with the energy efficiency, not to waste.
Well, exactly. So it's a marriage made in heaven between the two sides of a coin.
We keep saying that every time me and Mike meet. We're like, oh, this is.
I wonder what your wife say, but anyway, this is live on TV. I'm going into another sector here. Okay, let's look at COP30, right? What are you hoping for there? Will you be there? Will you, or are you going to come in, Mike, remotely on We Don't Have Time from another part of the world? But what's your contribution? What do you want to see? What do you want to see happen at COP30?
We'll be there for sure. Yeah, we've been there for the last few years with a large pavilion in the Blue Zone called the Global Renewables Hub, together with IRENA. So we have governments and the private sector together.
The International Renewable Energy Agency.
Exactly. Yeah. So they represent the governments, we represent the companies. We do this joint pavilion in the Blue Zone with multiple programmatic and roundtables and so on. But the key thing at COP, and Ambassador Largo, the president designate, says it's the COP of implementation. But Lula also said yesterday it's the COP of truth. But for us, the implementation piece is about getting stuff done, getting action at government level. Our call is for the implementation of tripling, of course, so accelerated permitting, financing, and so on, all the details that need to be done, as we said. But also for the COP to talk about grids and storage, to take that as a serious Baku pledge, to Belém action, and then the build out beyond. So that's going to be our hot topic of the 2 weeks.
Mike?
Yeah, so obviously talking about implementation, I think that's also our key focus. So we will be there as well, similar to last year as well. Planning to have, again, a high-level discussion, bringing together the stakeholders on the public-private side, and then obviously also to further exchange our collaboration in that end. I think our focus will be definitely on continuing on the Unlock the Finance, but also obviously showcasing the stories that are there, that are out there, that have been delivered, being it on the return on invest or being it also on the climate impact. So that will be our core focus moving forward. How success looks like, I think it is that the focus of COP should be on the outcome, not on the noise that is currently going around. So I think let's focus on the core, and let's use and take the opportunity.
I'm just going to say, I think it should be very interesting to bring the kind of messaging that you have into the Brazilian private sector, right? Because it may well be that, I mean, it's a country of incredible renewables, isn't it? I mean, it's 90-odd% or something.
Yeah, it's one of the world's leaders, 90-odd% with big hydro, but also wind and solar.
So maybe they get the message quite happily in Brazil on this topic, but there are other countries there that maybe need some help to further their ambitions in renewables.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we call it follow the leaders. You know, there's leaders in the space, both country level and company level. They've shown how it can be done and the benefits that can come from that. I think that Brazilian leadership is really important in that COP30 space.
And very important, I think, to showcase the energy efficiency to the Brazilian private sector, which may not be quite as fully engaged on this topic as maybe the renewables topic, which they're more familiar with.
Correct. And therefore that's a bit how we see also with our role, kind of really kind of to promote and foster the topic around COP28. And I think the Mutarao from the COP presidency is actually summarizing it very nicely. It needs this collective action. It needs also the bottom-up action. And what we have here this year at the Climate Week, the theme around let's power on. That's exactly about implementation. Technologies are there, they are scalable, they are investable. So let's just get it done.
Right. Gentlemen, we've come to limit with our time. So thank you very much for being with We Don't Have Time TV. You two guys represent the most positive manifestation of the way a global community can move forward on climate change. And you are the powerhouse that can eventually lead to a world that is without the need for too many fossil fuels in the economy. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. End of our show, we've just had these two wonderful guests, and we've had many wonderful guests over this week. I think it's been quite interesting, as we were just saying a few minutes ago, that the vibe here is not one of negativity, but one of positivity. There had been talk by some that the New York Climate Week wouldn't happen in 2025, that Canada was going to host it. But that would have been nice, but I think it was good that it stayed here, and that was really vital too. I think seeing and reflecting on the fact that governments are coming forward their national climate ambitions, national climate plans, NDCs for 2025 is very positive indeed. And we live in a world of 100+ countries. There's not just one country in this world, there's over 100. So what one country does can be complex, especially if they're large and big. But actually, we are the many who are acting on climate change, and we are going to change this world into a safer and more secure place. So thanks for tuning in. Stay with We Don't Have Time. And this isn't the last thing that's going to happen, because you're just going to be welcoming a very nice show about how to deal with AI and data centers and make sure that it's sustainable and climate friendly with our friends from the Munters Group. This was recorded a couple of days ago. Thanks very much for being with us. Bye. Hello and welcome back to the Climate Hub here at New York Climate Week 2025. There's undoubtedly a lot of interest around the world right now in data centers, as processing demands soar in response to the global boom in artificial intelligence. Supporters of AI underline often that it can revolutionize society in positive ways, perhaps even help humanity deal with climate change. And indeed, the head of the UN Climate Change Treaty in The Guardian this week said if we can manage the risks of AI, we can probably do a lot to fast forward action on climate change. But other people are more concerned with the fact that here and now, these massive data centers can consume very substantial amounts of energy. And a large part of all that energy also is needed to cool these machines. So the question on the lips of many people is, can the rapid growth of AI be done in such a way that does not undermine efforts to combat climate change? And can AI grow in ways that do not overstress other precious environmental assets? I'm thinking about healthy and sustainable water systems. To discuss these timely, important and complex issues, I'm joined by three super guests with intimate private sector knowledge of how industry can and is responding to these challenges. We have Andrea Haag. Okay, my Swedish is not the best, but I'm trying my best. Is the Vice President of Sustainability at the Munters Group, a global player in the area of climate control systems and solutions. We're also joined by Keith Dunavant. He is Vice President, Offer Strategy and Portfolio Management, Munters Data Center Technologies. Hello. And he's also a fellow of the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating and Air Conditioning Engineers. And last but not least, we've got Phil Lawson-Shanks. He's Chief Innovation Officer, Aligned Data Centers, and a 35-year plus veteran of the digital infrastructure industry. He also serves on the boards of the Neutrality Data Centers, the Green Building Initiative, the Clean Energy Buyers Association, and the Nomad Futurist Foundation. I won't ask you about that. I did look it up, so I know what it is. And we just want to welcome everybody to the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil, I'm going to start with you first. Can you briefly tell the viewers what your company does and how it fits into today's discussion?
Absolutely. So we are a design, build, operator of hyperscale data center platforms. We build the most sustainable data center platform that's possible to be built in the wholesale market space. Because of some particular cooling technologies, we've become very attractive to that high-density compute marketplace. So with our partnerships with Munters, we have some very interesting technologies that enable us to cool this incredible rate of capacity that we're seeing. If you think about how data centers used to be, the racks that you see within the halls, they were about 3 kilowatts per cabinet. We were able to cool up to 50 kilowatts a cabinet with just air. Now we're seeing the need to go to 120, 300, 600, up to a megawatt and beyond.
Okay. Okay, we're going to dive a bit more into that actually, because that's fascinating and quite complex too. So, but I think we also want to ask you this other question, and that's about this boom in data centers, because lots of people are talking about it all around the world. How big is this growth, and what is fueling it? Is it AI, or is it, in addition, other things? Are we just needing more processing capacity, even if there wasn't AI?
Sure. I think if you go back to COVID, for example, the growth rate of data centers were fairly stable. And a great point was on March 17th. If you look at the daily active users of Microsoft Teams, it was about 44 million daily active users. 19 days later, when everybody went home, that was up to 77 million daily active users. So we saw a tremendous growth curve there just to accommodate everybody working remotely. And that had tremendous impacts as we went through. Now we're seeing another huge tick in capacity with AI. Not only the large language models that we're seeing, but also how that's starting to filter out into the end user communities. So this is an exponential growth curve. All the hyperscalers are running after this to own that market space. The large enterprises are eager to get into that space as well, so they can use some of these agents within their infrastructure.
So was it foreseen? I mean, did everybody know this was coming? Or is it like even they saw it coming, but they didn't see how big the train was?
I think what happened when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, that changed the world. All of the hyperscalers have been working on their own versions of AI, so they then had to release theirs, which then created almost an arms race to keep up and keep ahead. Not only for this country, but globally. Every country with their sovereign data requirements, they're all trying to get ahead of this because the genie's out of the bottle. Everybody wants to use AI. It is the underpinning of this next industrial revolution, and it requires data centers to operate. So this isn't going away. I think we'll see S-curves within this. There'll be natural breakpoints, particularly in getting access to power, and then availability of chips as the fab plants come on stream. But this is a continual growth path. It's not going away.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Now let's turn to Andrea. Again, just briefly, for the audience, Munters, what is your involvement in the whole data center story?
Yeah, so maybe starting off with what Munters is at all. Who are we? So very briefly, we're a global manufacturing company that focuses very much on providing the right temperature and humidity in mission critical production. And one of the parts is cooling the data centers. We have a global footprint of 5,000 employees in more than 30 countries. And of course, data centers is one big part of that.
Right. And those staff are now being deployed much more on the data center front, perhaps, than they were 10 years ago.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
We see a tremendous growth, and alluding to what Phil just said, I mean, we try to keep up on that pace as well.
So we have 5 years on this planet, according to the science, to actually halve global greenhouse gas emissions, to have a 50-50 chance of hitting net zero by 2050 and at least saving most of what we call wonderful planet Earth, right? So this is a really critical moment where suddenly AI has come into it and kind of scrambled some of the plans. Sometimes you get political scrambling as well, but this is a new challenge. You as a company have really been rising to the challenge of climate action, climate change, and so tell us about the climate implications of these data centers and also how this fits into your company's new and ambitious climate goals.
Yeah, so then again, taking a step back, looking at our entire business and trying to couple business and sustainability, we mapped all our emissions throughout the value chain, and we can see that no matter is it data centers or other applications, 99.97% of the carbon dioxide emissions or greenhouse gas emissions are in the product use phase. So we're looking at products that live for 15, maybe 20 years and actually emitting a lot of carbon dioxide during the use phase. This is part of our ambitions to halve our emissions between 2023 and 2030, to align with the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees scenario. And in this, data centers are a great deal, of course, together with the rest of our business areas.
So you can also help. You can help yourselves to achieve your targets, but you can help a lot of other industries and businesses to actually maybe achieve some targets they may well have on climate change by your technology in the data centers, etc.
Absolutely, and I would say that we are very committed to halving our climate footprint towards 2030, but still actually doubling in size. And I think that is also very much connected to the data centers, because we need to work with the energy efficiency, with the renewable fuels of our customers, and also rely very much on stated policy globally.
Thanks, Andrea. Let's go to Keith now. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit, and by inference the people watching this, can you talk through in a bit more detail what kind of technologies you are deploying to, in a sense, help at least green to a certain extent the data centers, rather than not being green at all?
Sure. Our role at Munters is to figure out how do we reject the heat that's liberated from all these servers most efficiently. For every watt of electricity that's consumed by the compute, there's a watt of heat that's liberated. So that's a lot of heat that has to be rejected from the building. And so we started out looking at package systems that used forms of evaporative cooling, where water was actually evaporated to enhance the efficiency. And while those systems are still being deployed to some degree, they're on a decline because of the high consumption of water and the desire to become waterless. And therefore, and also due to the scale of the amount of heat that needs to be rejected, packaged units were no longer practical. The amount of air that had to be removed for air cooling resulted in massive ductwork and so forth. So we've reverted to what's referred to as a split system. That has a heat absorption component that's in the space and a heat rejection element that's typically on the roof or around the perimeter of the building. And so for split systems, we approach it in two different ways. We have a chilled water-based infrastructure. And when I say chilled water, that's a water circulating in a closed loop. There's no water evaporated. And that can be used to either cool air or liquid. So more and more of the data centers today, the high performance compute is required to be liquid cooled due to the high heat flux out of each of these GPUs or CPUs. So we are manufacturing from the beginning chillers that are external, that actually reject the heat, and they're super efficient. They use circular condenser coils to maximize the amount of heat rejection per square foot of actual unit. And they have something called a cascade evaporator that allows us to most efficiently do the heat rejection. That's then, after the heat is removed and the chilled water goes down into the space, it's connected to either chilled water crawl unit, computer room air handlers that circulate warm air, remove the heat, and deliver it at room neutral condition, or something called a coolant distribution unit that has the liquid circulating to the servers in connecting to the cold plates at the chip level, absorbing the heat, bringing it back to this coolant distribution unit that exchanges the heat from the closed loop chiller plant. So we have the chilled water-based infrastructure, and then finally we have a refrigerant-based infrastructure that's mostly thermosiphon driven. And that can do both air and liquid heat rejection.
Right. So I can understand, therefore, you're protecting water supplies because it's a closed loop. How does that create energy, I can say energy saving or energy efficiency, or what is in the system? Because at the moment I can see that you're cooling the data center. That's very important. Otherwise it goes bang, right? Sorry, that's simplification, but where does the energy benefit come in for the user?
For using water?
For the data center itself.
Yeah, well, you can think of water as a refrigerant. As it changes phase from a liquid to a vapor, it absorbs a lot of heat.
Yeah.
Just like your sweat on your skin, that helps you cool. And so when you consume water in the cooling process, it can be more efficient, but it's also not as sustainable because you're using a valuable resource. So most of the data centers today, there's a misnomer that, when you're using ChatGPT or something, that you're consuming a lot of water, which isn't really valid except in rare cases. They're all operating dry. They're not evaporating water in most cases today.
Right, okay.
But maybe I could also add, just from the perspective of cooling differences, if you cool with air or with water.
Yeah.
Maybe we all know, but water leads heat a lot more efficiently than air does.
Right.
And that is also why it's more efficient to use a liquid cooler than the air cooler.
Okay, I've got it. Good. All right, that explains it. Thank you very much. Let's chat a little bit more about this whole topic though now, because by the way, I see that Microsoft Microsoft just put a data center in Norway because they had access to hydroelectric, and they also said because it's a bit cool up there, which I suppose is possible. That we could run out of cool places very quickly, couldn't we? So I suppose not everybody can just pile into Norway and blanket Norway with data centers saying job done, you know. So we have to have these technologies to deal with different, ecological conditions in different parts of the world. But interesting, it's very much in the news. So we've heard a lot about the boom in the data centers, and I think I asked whether this was a temporary boom linked with training AI that will eventually slow down somewhat. But I think you made it quite clear that this is not going to be the case, right? This is going to carry on.
Yes.
So we can't just say job's going to be done in 5 years. It could be, we could all be long gone, up with the invisible choir singing in heaven by the time that we would slow down. So this has to keep moving, absolutely.
Yes.
Is anybody trying to, look at this, to think about, next steps? Is it being planned? Is there anybody central? Or is it just governments? Or is it the private sector like Microsoft or Google? Is there any vision in how this is going to be planned over time? Or are we missing that a little bit was one thought that came to my mind was, is it a national planning issue? Is that what it is? Or
That's an interesting question. I think, and I can only really talk about the Americas. So it's very much commercially driven. Most of the sites that are being chosen today are sites because they have access to power. Power is the gating factor.
Right.
Availability of power.
Mm-hmm.
So as that grows out, we'll see more. But also within that, you're seeing a lot more interaction with the communities. So we're seeing data centers that are being built. Like for example, we took an industrial site in the north of the country in Ohio, a city called Sandusky. Up until very recently, it was producing most of the ball bearings in the world. After the Second World War, this site was put together. But about 20 years ago, that business went offshore. It was cheaper to make those in other countries. So that site had a couple of different lives, but it's been lying derelict for a long time. So we took it over, we cleaned it up, and we're building data centers there. But also we're very active in the community. We're working with the schools and the local communities to bring in internships to see how we can bring impact into that community, to really engage with them. And I think you'll see more and more of that across the country. But right now, data centers are being built where they can be built,
right,
frankly.
Right. So I imagine as this thing is rapidly taken off, right? There comes a certain point when it becomes a reality in the minds of state or regional planning people, and they suddenly will start looking more closely at things like noise, or maybe could we use the heat in some way in the local, say, district heating or something like that. But I imagine it's gone so quickly, so fast. It's like the horse has just gone ripping out of the door, right? I mean, you're doing your absolute best to make sure that your technology is in these centers to ensure there is, a sensible way of cooling them, right? But it's obviously a dynamic story that will probably evolve. What do you think, Andrea?
No, well, I'm thinking that at least Munters has 70 years of industrial knowledge, and we have processes built in to sort of cope with those questions.
Yeah.
Even though the products now are used in a different setting, we have the procedures and we have the mechanisms to sort of capture that, I think. And of course it needs to be developed to fit with the modern world, what we see coming up. So turning to Phil here, I don't know if that applies to you as well, that you sort of have those mechanisms in place.
Yeah, we look to reuse as much heat as we can. In North America, it's a challenge because district heating are usually down in the cities, and the data centers are way out in the periphery. I think as we get more to this new emergent AI edge, I think that will play more of a role. We've looked at many ways of using the heat. Right now, with the current technology, the heat isn't what we call useful heat. It's not hot enough to make a difference. But the wonderful thing about liquids is once you get it to a certain temperature, it takes very little energy to bump it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So there are lots of experiments, maybe heating greenhouses, doing all sorts of things, maybe local industrial use for that
Local
waste heat.
swimming pools?
Swimming pools, yeah. There was a case in Paris where a data center provider was using the heat to heat the swimming pools for the Olympics.
Yeah.
There's more work to be done, but we're all engaged in looking at how we can
Because
utilize that heat.
now we're talking about the circular economy, right? If we
Exactly.
think about it.
Yeah.
And that requires more than just one player. It requires a whole ecosystem of players to make decisions that are beneficial for everybody, and that's a different picture. I'm curious that Munters must be learning things from the data center experience, and whether the things that you're learning could be applied to new and different kinds of or improved technologies over time that could be used, say, in other areas instead of data centers. I mean, this planet is getting hotter anyway. We know we have to keep cities a bit cool. People may be suffering from heat strokes and things like that because the city is getting hotter. We need a lot more trees, of course. They're quite useful at cooling cities. I think we can all be in favor of that. But maybe some of the technologies you're dealing with could be applied in the future to other things. Is that possible, or Keith?
It's definitely possible. Right now, the focus, though, is purely on the data center heat rejection technologies. I mean, the thermosiphon heat rejection approaches have potential for use in other commercial applications. We haven't gone there yet, but there is that possibility. To talk about compute and what we've learned, I mean, we're actually using AI to make our systems more efficient.
Yeah.
We've already done that and improved our coil efficiencies.
Interesting.
And I think that, I mean, on the topic of what we see today, that energy demand increases, that sort of puts the focus very much on energy efficiency again and again and again. And that has been part of our mission the past decades in other applications too. And I mean, we need to apply that for data center cooling as well.
So, we have, I think we need to wrap up here because it's a conversation that has no end, right? Because it's so vast in its nature. But, I mean, we have the next UN Climate Conference coming in Belém in Brazil in November. We don't have time. We'll be there broadcasting live every day for 6 or 7 hours. Oh, my God. Of course, there is this UN target, this recent target of tripling of renewable energy and doubling of energy efficiency, and it seems that many governments are behind, quite happy to do this, right? But I would thought that because of the AI and the data center story, there's an even extra urgency in meeting these targets, even maybe before the deadlines that they have set. And so I can imagine there's going to be quite a lot of lobbying in Belém to see even more stepped up action on energy efficiency and renewables because of this additional new challenge we all have. And I don't know what you think, whether it could be a topic for the government.
For sure, but I think that looking ahead, I mean, 2030 is just around the corner and we're running as fast as possible. And I think that if we can just continue on the path of energy efficiency, the use of renewables actually, and also the stated policies going forward, I mean, would those three wishes come true, I would be so happy. I think it's very difficult to push it even harder.
You're right, because essentially with energy efficiency, for years governments have been talking about energy efficiency, and it's had little blips up and then it's had little blips back, hasn't it? And for some reason governments can't get around their heads that energy efficiency is so absolutely, should be an equal with renewable energy in some ways, because it is the big way of saving energy and money and things like that. But governments, I think they like big wind turbines. I mean, I like big wind turbines too, but energy efficiency is a bit more invisible, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you could have some energy efficiency, we have had discussions on several percent, 5, 10, 20, 30%, and then you could convert it into renewables, for instance. That would be more sustainable than just transforming, for instance. So
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And with our partnership, that's one of the things that we look for. How we can optimize the technology that we have. We're using an AI tool to optimize the cooling function within the buildings, so it responds to the load changes, to the atmospheric changes, and that's all very important. But also, not only for energy, we're very focused on the embodied carbon of our buildings and the infrastructure, so that we can track that, because that whole cycle of embodied carbon, reuse, second, third lives of some of this technology is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say there's two aspects of efficiency. There's the compute efficiency that we've been talking about, and most people don't realize that for every watt of power, the compute that the silicon providers are able to achieve today is 100 times what it was per watt of power compared to 5 years ago. And then there's the energy efficiency of the cooling aspects, and we are striving to achieve efficiencies that are unheard of. So that we're only consuming 3, 4, 5% of the IT energy in terms of the power to reject the heat. Which is huge.
That's sort of worth bearing in mind, right? That's worth bearing in mind. Sometimes people miss that point. Good. I think we've run out of time. That was really interesting. Thank you very much indeed for being with us here on We Don't Have Time. It's a very interesting topic, and we will be following it as it goes forward, and maybe we can come around again maybe in 6 months or 12 months from now and talk about this again and say, where are we now?
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you very much.